Good evening. I'm Brett Baer. We're coming to you live tonight from Fox News election headquarters in New York. Breaking tonight, voters in 16 states and 1 U.S. territory casting ballots for the nominees to run in the November general election. We'll start getting raw vote totals coming in a few states next hour. President Biden running virtually unopposed on the ballot, although there are serious concerns about the president's age, his mental fitness, even within his own party. Meantime, former President Donald Trump already has a commanding lead over his only major challenger entering today's balloting. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Brit Hume here in New York has his expert analysis. Peter Doocy at the White House as the president prepares for what is shaping up to be another battle against the former president, likely. Bill Melugin in Charleston, South Carolina, for what many believe is former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley's last stand. But we begin with congressional correspondent Aisha Hasni in West Palm Beach, Florida, and the Trump campaign ready for a big night. Good evening, Aisha.
Good evening to you, Brad. Mar-a-Lago is getting ready for a big party tonight. About 1,000 people are expected to celebrate here as the former president predicts he could win every single state tonight.
I would vote for him if he was sitting in a jail cell.
From California to Texas and North Carolina, supporters of former President Trump say nothing will stop them from putting him on the November ballot.
He speaks his mind and he says what he wants to, and I think a lot of people can respect that.
Tonight, the Trump campaign tells Fox they anticipate moving forward from Super Tuesday with more than 1,000 delegates. Trump won't say if he'll ask former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to step down tonight, but says she has no path forward.
What's she doing other than hurting the Republican Party? I want everybody to come together. We're going to have a unified party because our real opponent happens to be named Biden.
On Monday, the former president celebrated a historic Supreme Court decision keeping him on the Colorado ballot. But now Democrat Congressman Jamie Raskin says he's working on legislation to prevent anyone engaged in an insurrection from holding federal office. That unlikely to go anywhere in a Republican-controlled House.
They're real losers. If they spent their time focusing on the country and making America great again.
And Brett, former President Trump wants to pivot hard to the general election. The first event after Super Tuesday, after tonight, will be a Georgia rally on Saturday, just about 60 miles north of where President Biden will be campaigning on the same day. So again, dueling events for the two presidents. Brett.
Aisha Hasni live at Mar-a-Lago. Aisha, thanks. Former South Carolina Governor, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says she hopes to be competitive during tonight's Super Tuesday voting. What that actually means and what her future plans are remain unclear tonight. Correspondent Bill Melugin is covering the Haley campaign tonight from Charleston, South Carolina. Good evening, Bill.
Brett, good evening to you. The reason we are standing outside right now is because Nikki Haley doesn't have any events listed tonight on this Super Tuesday, a night that is going to be pivotal for whatever happens next in her campaign.
As much as everybody wants to go and push me out, I'm not ready to get out yet.
Nikki Haley standing her ground in the face of questions about why she's still in the race.
I don't know why everybody's so adamant that they have to follow Trump's lead to get me out of this race. You know, all of these people deserve to vote. 16 states want to have their voices heard. Let's let their voices get heard.
The Haley campaign says in recent days she's traveled 8,000 miles and held 15 rallies across the country, including in Maine. Today, we met a Maine primary voter here in South Carolina, a registered independent who said she already voted for Haley in Maine's primary.
She stands for everything I stand for. She's a strong female. She was a great ambassador. She was a great governor, very strong in her convictions.
If Nikki Haley does not win the nomination, will you support Trump?
No.
Why?
I feel he's really bad for the country. I think he alienates too many people.
Fox spoke with Haley supporters in Minnesota who are divided on what to do if Trump is the eventual nominee.
I will not vote for I'll write in Nikki.
Oh, I would absolutely vote for Trump.
Biden.
It won't be Trump.
Yeah.
He's too divisive.
And Brett, we asked the Nikki Haley campaign if they like some of the early results that start coming in from these states, if they feel they're positive, will they consider having an event somewhere here in Charleston tonight? We were told, quote, probably not. We'll send it back to you.
That's interesting in and of itself. Bill Melugin in Charleston. Bill, thanks. President Biden is predicting a re-election win in November. He's also calling former President Donald Trump a loser. But recent poll numbers tell a different story, at least right now. President Biden is hoping to get his point across on policy and politics later this week with a big spotlight in D.C. White House correspondent Peter Doocy has that part of the story tonight live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. President Biden is here at the White House, where Super Tuesday feels like a formality, and officials would rather focus on using Thursday's State of the Union as a springboard towards the rematch they're hoping for with Donald Trump.
Mr. President, what are you preparing for your State of the Union address?
You'll hear me on Thursday.
President Biden is back from 4 days of speech prep at Camp David.
He's going to be working on it, I believe, until the very last minute.
Today, he tested lines about so-called shrinkflation.
The Cookie Monster. He pointed out his cookies are getting smaller, paying the same price.
Officials say President Biden will follow tonight's Super Tuesday results, but the president is more focused already on the general.
You guys don't report. I'm winning. Five in a row. You guys only look at the New York Times. They're a great paper.
Biden's plan to beat Trump in 24 is to talk a lot about beating Trump in 20.
That gets into his head in a way that very few issues do, and Joe Biden is going straight at that issue.
Amid age and acuity concerns, the President Biden may not make it to November's election. NBC is reporting, as former First Lady Michelle Obama has expressed several times over the years, she will not be running for president. Mrs. Obama supports President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's re-election campaign. Taylor Swift did last cycle, and today she re-entered the fray, urging supporters to vote, quote, the people who most represent you into power.
President Biden has said a possible endorsement by Taylor Swift is classified. How disappointed is he that she is telling people to vote, but not for him?
Going to be very careful. We're talking about 2024, so I can't comment on what Taylor Swift is saying or not saying.
And even though tonight is expected to go very well for President Biden, he is in for the night. Don't expect to see him on stage thanking Democrats in the primary states for voting for him. There's nothing on the schedule the rest of tonight, or for that matter, at any point tomorrow. Brett?
Peter Doocy live on the North Lawn. Peter, thanks. We have our first result of the night right now. The Fox News decision desk can now project that President Biden will win the mail-in Democratic primary in Iowa. Not a shocker, but it's definitive. Please join us for our Super Tuesday coverage. It all starts 7 p.m. Eastern Time right after. Special report goes all night long. We have you covered. Let's bring in Fox News chief political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, good evening.
Hi, Brett.
What are you looking for tonight?
Well, it'll be interesting to see whether Nikki Haley can get some margins in some of these states and would give her some reason to keep going. But I think nearly everyone agrees that Trump is on a glide path to the nomination. He's overwhelmingly likely to get it. It'll be interesting to see what tone he strikes when he comes out to announce his victory or and to celebrate it with his maybe as many as 1,000 people, as Aisha Hannity said there at Mar-a-Lago. Will he be conciliatory generally? Will he be conciliatory toward Nikki Haley? That'll be worth noting when it happens.
As Peter mentioned, Thursday is the big event in D.C., the State of the Union. You've covered a million of these. I've covered a lot of them. I know. And
either of us wants to count.
It's it's often a shopping list of what a president wants, but this has a little different flavor to it. I want to play a soundbite about President Biden in previous State of the Unions. This is about the border, 2022-2023.
We need to secure our border and fix the immigration system. And as you might guess, I think we can do both. Congress must restore the right and
and there's a lot of back and forth there. Obviously, immigration is an issue we see on every poll that we look at.
It took a while for it to develop, but it is rampant now throughout the country because people who live in far places removed from the border have gotten a taste of what it's like when these immigrants arrive in large numbers and tax their social services programs and cause crime and all the rest of it. And the president is vulnerable on this issue because he sort of didn't do anything. And people can see that, and they can say time and again the border is secure, as you kept hearing them say, and they can say that we've done everything we can do. But I don't think people believe that. And it'll be interesting to hear how he presents that issue. Also, of course, obviously, Brett, Ukraine and Israel. It'll be interesting to see how much of the speech he devotes to foreign policy, how strong he is compared to where he has been on Israel, but as well on Ukraine.
I want to play a soundbite about entitlements. This is back in 2023, another give and take with the Republicans there.
Some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Well, I'm glad to see, and I tell you, I enjoy conversion. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks.
Now, obviously, that back and forth was interesting. The entitlement issue is still a big issue. Both parties not dealing with it. But you wonder how the State of the Union is going to set up on the issue of Israel, for example.
Exactly right. He came out strong, and basically he has stuck to his guns in terms of continuing the armament shipments to help Israel and so on. But rhetorically, he's moved away from Israel. And, the reports are the White House is furious with Benjamin Netanyahu, and the president has talked about the need for more humanitarian aid into Gaza and all the rest of it, which suggests he's softening on his support. I'm not sure he really is, but it's a big issue. And within his own party, his support for Israel is hurting him with a wing of the party, which is considerably larger than it is in the Republican Party, for example, that is very sympathetic toward the Arab side in this conflict, and long has been, and especially toward those who are suffering in Gaza.
Last thing, just going back to tonight, if you thought back a year ago, even 6 months ago, that we would be here looking at the poll numbers we're looking at, independents trending towards President Trump on a number of different issues, would you have believed that?
Well, I've always thought that the age and acuity issue was a ticking time bomb. And I was saying back when it was not at all fashionable to say it, that he is senile. And now I think he is palpably senile, and the country sees it. And one of his challenges on Thursday night, Brett, I think, would be whether he can assuage the concerns of those even within his own party who think and say that he's too old for the job.
Brett, we got a long night ahead. Get some coffee. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it.
Up next, how the border crisis is affecting the 2024 campaign. We'll have a live report from South Texas, plus new alarms about sexual crimes by Hamas terrorists against Israeli citizens. Alabama lawmakers facing public pressure to get in vitro fertilization services restarted in the state have advanced legislation to shield providers from the fallout of a court ruling that equated frozen embryos to children. Committees in the state Senate and House approved nearly identical bills that would protect providers from lawsuits and criminal prosecution for damage or death of an embryo during IVF services. Lawmakers are aiming to give final approval tomorrow and send the legislation to Republican Governor Kay Ivey, who has indicated she will sign it. The House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic has subpoenaed former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. The committee wants him to testify about his COVID-19 nursing home policies. Cuomo directed the state's nursing homes to accept COVID patients in 2020. That decision led to fierce criticism. Republican leaders of that committee say the action caused deadly consequences for New York's most vulnerable. A Cuomo spokesperson says the move is an obvious press charade. The president's border crisis has emerged as the #1 issue in many national polls. This evening, we take a look at how it's affecting the race for the White House. Senior national correspondent Rich Edson reports tonight from Laredo.
In 72 hours this past weekend at the southern border, Customs and Border Protection officials say they've encountered more than 21,000 migrants, a surge largely in Arizona and California. Record numbers of migrants have crossed under the Biden administration. And recent polling shows immigration is now among the top issues driving voters.
America's had enough. They've had enough of Joe Biden. They've had enough of this open border.
Republicans have demanded President Biden reverse his executive orders that unraveled Trump immigration policies. Some Democrats have also pushed the White House to act.
As Democrats, we cannot say it doesn't exist or try to ignore it. The president can still take steps to address border security, but they need to take those steps soon.
The White House did secure an agreement with Senate Republicans on border issues. Former President Trump opposed it, and congressional Republicans followed suit. Trump's primary challenger, Nikki Haley, says the former president sank the border bill only to cause chaos and help his election prospects. House Republicans are now working on a bill to require the detention of undocumented immigrants arrested for crimes. Biden is under pressure from some in his own party to reject Republican demands and protect those traveling here to claim asylum. In Texas, some Democrats also accuse Republicans of distorting the border crisis for political gain.
We can fix it right through comprehensive immigration reform, but Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz and all the rest of them, they don't want to fix it. They just want to yell about it.
Gutierrez there is one of the many Democrats running in the primary today to challenge Republican incumbent Senator Ted Cruz. Cruz, who has repeatedly referenced the number of migrants crossing this river and into the United States. Brett?
Rich Edson in Laredo. Rich, thanks. Customs and Border Protection Services tell Fox a Colombian national on the FBI's terror watch list was apprehended February 21st in Eagle Pass, Texas, just days before former President Trump visited that area. The suspect was taken into custody by Texas officials, then turned over to Border Patrol. Customs data shows there have been 59 matches to the terror watch list since this fiscal year began October 1st. All but one have been on the southern border. Breaking tonight, Arizona Democrat turned independent Senator Kyrsten Sinema says she will not run for re-election. Senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram is on Capitol Hill to tell us why, what she's saying about it, what this could mean for that Arizona Senate race. Good evening, Chad.
Brett, good evening. There was no clear path for Sinema to win. She left the Democratic Party and is now an independent. Sinema faced a challenge from Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego and from Republican Kari Lake. Fox has told Sinema was disillusioned by her colleagues after Republicans torched a bipartisan border deal she helped broker.
Because I choose civility, understanding, listening, working together to get stuff done, I will leave the Senate at the end of this year. Over my career, I've shown how government can work for everyday people.
Sinema also alienated the left as she fought against eliminating the filibuster. But the White House saluted Sinema for her work on infrastructure.
She's been a partner with us on many critical issues that matter to the American people, and I think that's important.
Sinema's departure reflects increasing polarization in Congress. There are few moderate Democrats left. Joe Manchin is also leaving.
The only political victories that matter these days are symbolic. Attacking your opponents on cable news or social media. Compromise is a dirty word. We've arrived at that crossroad, and we chose anger and division.
Republican Steve Daines leads his party's campaign efforts. Daines says the vacancy creates an opportunity for the GOP to flip the seat. Brett?
Chad Pergram live on the Hill. Chad, thanks. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is facing new charges tonight, several of them. Federal prosecutors have leveled obstruction of justice allegations against the senator in yet another superseding indictment relating to a multi-year alleged bribery scheme involving Egypt and Qatar governments. The senator is accused of acting as a foreign agent and accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars of bribes to benefit the Egyptian government through his power and influence as a senator on the Foreign Relations Committee. Up next, one of the nation's most high-profile progressive lawmakers gets a taste of her own medicine here in town. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 17 in Nashville as authorities investigate a plane crash that left 5 people dead. The small aircraft was forced to make an emergency landing near Interstate 40 in West Nashville. Police say the pilot reported engine and power failure before the crash. Fox 2 in Detroit as a projectile from a Clinton Township explosion kills a man who was not near that building. The fire chief says the 19-year-old victim was about a quarter mile away when he was hit by a flying canister. A firefighter was also injured. The chief says shrapnel flew as far as a mile in all directions. The cause of that fire remains under investigation. And this is a live look at San Francisco from our affiliate, Fox 2. One of the big stories there tonight. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos reclaims the title of world's richest person. It's Bezos' first time on top of the list since 2021. He dethrones Elon Musk on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index with a net worth of $200 billion with a B. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. Meta-owned platforms Facebook and Instagram were down for about 2 hours across the globe today. The disruption started around 10 a.m. Eastern Time. An outage tracking website says there were more than 550,000 reports of disruptions for Facebook and about 92,000 for Instagram. The company is blaming what it calls a technical issue. Stocks today had their worst day in 3 weeks ahead of testimony from the Federal Reserve Chairman and new economic data. The Dow lost 405 today. The S&P 500 dropped 52. The Nasdaq fell 268. The Dartmouth men's basketball team has voted to unionize. It is an unprecedented step toward forming the first labor union for college athletes. The players voted 13-2 to join Service Employees International Union Local 560, which already represents some Dartmouth workers. Activists are turning the tables on progressives as the Hamas-Israel war goes on. One of the most high-profile pro-Palestinian lawmakers finds herself on the wrong side of her earlier exhortation that protesters should make their targets feel uncomfortable. Correspondent Nate Foy shows us tonight from here in New York.
I need you to understand that this is not okay.
It's not okay that there's a genocide happening. You're not actively against it.
You're lying.
Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez faced pro-Palestinian protesters while leaving a Brooklyn movie theater.
Just say it's a genocide. Just say it.
The Congresswoman addressed the demonstrators and appeared to claim she's already accused Israel of genocide.
You're going to cut it, and you're going to cut this, and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's up, man. And you're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
Protect black bodies!
Protect black bodies!
In 2020, the Congresswoman defended protesters, calling to defund the police, tweeting, quote, "Popular support often starts small and grows. To folks who complain protest demands make others uncomfortable, that's the point." Ocasio-Cortez is just the latest Democrat to face political pressure over the Israel-Hamas war.
Palestine will be free!
President Joe Biden faced protest in New York while visiting last week.
And the occupation now! Occupation now!
And at his hotel in San Francisco weeks ago. But the president's team protects him.
That's because of protests that you don't want to share details about the president's schedule. You're afraid of protests.
I don't have anything else to share on that.
Free Palestine!
Pro-Palestinian protesters interrupted First Lady Jill Biden's speech in Arizona over the weekend. Protesters also filled the streets in Los Angeles this weekend, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Democratic voters in several states say they will not vote for President Joe Biden because of his support for Israel. Brett?
Nate, thank you. United Nations officials say there are reasonable grounds to believe Hamas terrorists committed sexual crimes against women during last October's massacre in Israel and continue to do so. That assessment comes amid ongoing ceasefire talks in Egypt and humanitarian airdrops by the U.S. and Jordan into Gaza. Correspondent Trey Yingst has the latest tonight from Tel Aviv.
Pallets of food float through the sky, dropped into Gaza for a second time by the U.S. military. Inside, more than 36,000 meals for hungry Palestinians, including some of Gaza's most vulnerable residents.
Now, when children are starting, as the doctors are telling our colleagues, to die from starvation, that should be an alarm like no other.
The UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns of a growing humanitarian disaster inside Gaza that will only be made worse as the conflict continues. 151 days into the war, Hamas representatives are meeting with mediators in Cairo to continue ceasefire talks. After 2 days of discussion, it was decided to extend the conversations as President Biden calls for an end to the fighting.
Mr. President, how close are we to the ceasefire?
It's in the hands of Hamas right now. The Israelis have been cooperating. There's an offer out there that's rational. We don't know what. We'll know in a couple of days if it's going to happen. But we need the ceasefire.
Officials in Tel Aviv say time is running out to save the remaining hostages. Around 100 are believed to be alive, along with at least 30 bodies that Israel is working to return. New findings by the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence add to the pressure to reach a deal.
With regard to the hostages taken to Gaza, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives.
The UN Special Envoy says there are reasonable grounds to believe that sexual violence is still being committed against those held in captivity. Brett.
Trey Yangst in Tel Aviv. Trey, thanks. Hungary's president has formally signed a bill approving Sweden's NATO bid. That removes the last obstacle after 18 months of delays that frustrated the alliance as it sought to expand in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It is the second expansion of NATO's ranks in a year. Up next, our special panel here in New York on what to expect this Super Tuesday. First, beyond our borders tonight, Ukraine claims it has sunk another Russian warship in the Black Sea. It says it used high-tech sea drones to destroy the vessel, which reportedly can carry cruise missiles and about 60 crew members. The Ukrainians say they've sunk at least 12 Russian naval vessels so far. And this is a live look at Earth from the International Space Station. One of the big stories there tonight, 3 astronauts and a Russian cosmonaut expressed their joy after arriving at the ISS. SpaceX's Falcon rocket blasted off from Kennedy Space Center Sunday. The team is replacing a crew that has been aboard since August. During their half-year stint, the new crew will oversee the arrivals of 2 new rocket ships. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
I don't know why everybody's so adamant that they have to follow Trump's lead to get me out of this race. 16 states want to have their voices heard.
We will go on to victory, the likes of which no one has ever seen before. We will evict crooked Joe Biden from the White House.
Donald Trump is dangerous. We must re-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Another Biden-Trump rematch would probably be easy game for Trump.
I don't like either one of them, to be honest.
I think that Nikki Haley knows that she has no chance.
Well, it's a big night. Super Tuesday. We've got 16 states in all, 1 territory, both Republicans and Democrats. Heading on the Republican side into this night, the current delegate total, 273 for former President Trump, 43 for former Governor Nikki Haley. A number of Super Tuesday GOP delegates up for grabs tonight, 854. Here's the AP. Why Super Tuesday matters and what to watch. As the race pivots to Super Tuesday, the vast map seems tailor-made for Trump to roll up an insurmountable lead on Haley. Haley's banked a considerable amount of campaign money. She says she wants to stay in the race until the Republican National Convention in July, in case delegates there have second thoughts about formally nominating Trump. Amidst his legal woes, she may not be able to afford another sweeping loss. However, with that, let's bring in our special panel. Bill Hemmer, co-host of America's Newsroom, and also he'll be on the big board tonight. Martha MacCallum, anchor and executive editor of The Story with Martha MacCallum, also my co-anchor tonight, and Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five. Is the board all warmed up?
I think so. We'll find out at the same time, right?
What are you looking for tonight?
Listen, I think if you're Nikki Haley's team, early on the night, Vermont's going to close at 7 o'clock, and so too is Virginia. And if you scan the possibilities for delegates, It appears that those two states are strong possibilities for her to pick up some delegates. Maybe not win the state necessarily. I went back 8 years ago to Super Tuesday just to try to get a fix as to where we were then, you know, not just as a nation, but where the Republican Party was. Donald Trump won 283 delegates that night. Keep in mind, California was in June. California is tonight now. And Ted Cruz won 245, a difference of 38. So it's a pretty close race here, right? And earlier today on Fox and Friends, he was talking about going 15 for 15 tonight. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but he was mentioning that earlier today. You put all that together, and he has won the Republican Party. And he will be the Republican nominee. The question is whether it happens next Tuesday or the week after.
Yeah. To that point, here's the former president this morning talking about his competitor.
There's no path for her to win. Whether she likes hearing that or not, there's no path for her to win, no matter what. There is no path. What's she doing other than hurting the Republican Party?
So one of the storylines tonight, Martha, is how he talks about her, how he talks about her supporters, and how that unity message comes across from the former president.
Absolutely, and we've heard different versions of how he speaks about her. He clearly wants her to shut down her campaign, right? And he's hoping that he will make a definitive argument tonight for her to do that, and she might. We know that she is not planning to make a speech tonight, which is unusual. Every other night for these primaries, she has come out and said she's going to keep going. So tonight is an evaluation period for Nikki Haley. Maybe we'll hear from her tomorrow. She's at home in Charleston, South Carolina right now, so we'll see what she says. But clearly Trump wants to shut her down at this point, and whether or not she goes away is a big question. But how will he speak about her? Will it be bird brain? Will it be attacking the dress that she's wearing? I'm guessing that he will want to start to pull over some of her voters, and we may see sort of the more gentleman version of President Trump that you and I saw in Iowa in the town hall, and maybe if he's looking towards the general election, he will focus more in that way.
Yeah. Meantime, on the other side, Axios herald Biden's new strategy: go for Trump's jugular. Biden has told friends he thinks Trump is wobbly, both intellectually and emotionally, and will explode if Biden mercilessly gigs and goads him. Go haywire in public, as one advisor put it. Instead of focusing on jobs and the economy, areas in which polls suggest Americans aren't giving Biden much credit, Biden would be making the contest as much about Trump as his own accomplishments. Don't you think that's a dangerous road to go down?
Maybe. I think you had in your lead-in a fellow, you interviewed some people, and they all said that, several of them said they wished that neither of these guys were the choices that the country was going to be confronted with. So if you see that kind of polling in either campaign, you go for the juggler on either side. I wish we could get back to campaigns where we tried to understand the concerns and fears of Americans, tried to provide inspired leadership. And in the process, you may go after the juggler every once in a while, but the campaign was bigger than that. I'm going to be looking tonight to see what Martha said and what Bill said in your lead-in about the speech. Does the speech not only try to go after Nikki Haley, but how do you begin to speak to the country? How do you begin to speak to those independents? We have to remember the last two elections where people voted, Democrats did pretty well. They didn't lose as bad in 22. They held on to the Senate.
So are you surprised by the polls now? Because these recent polls, the string of them, has really been quite something to watch.
Look, this race, the country is divided. There are about 1 million voters in 6 or 7 states, give or take a few 100,000, that really independents that decide the race. I'm not surprised by the polling, to answer your question. But what I will be surprised tonight is if President Trump, I'll be looking for it. And I don't want to, I try to take out my surprise element now. I'll be looking to see if he speaks to the country. Because if he's still just speaking to Republicans who support him, it bodes well for the other side. I'm a Democrat. It bodes well for Democrats. Nikki Haley, interesting to me, you can't be critical of someone in your party who is gaining 30 to 40% of the vote in states, and you say you want to bring the party together. We heard him be magnanimous in one state. How is he magnanimous tonight? Not just to her, but to the country. If he's able to do that, if I'm a Democrat, from a political standpoint, you get a little more concerned. But as a red-blooded American, it gives me some comfort that these guys want to lead not only their party and not only the people that support them, but those of us in this country who believe we need a leader, need our fears and concerns addressed.
Bill, these polls I mean, they're polls. They're snapshots in time. They're not votes. But the Des Moines Register in Iowa today, well-respected poll, comes out with a poll that has Trump up 15 points on Joe Biden. That's exponentially what it was just at the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah, you think about that. That used to be a swing state, right? If those numbers are correct, and the poll that you point out has a lot of credibility. Harold, to your point about the split, you know, we had our own numbers that came out on Monday morning. I think there's a bit of a rumble across the political world on Sunday morning when the New York Times came out with that, with the numbers about Joe Biden. There was one line in there that I brought up repeatedly, and I don't get it. But if this is true, Harold, Mr. Biden is winning only 83% of his voters from 2020, with 10% saying they now back Mr. Trump. So the way I read that, if that's true and they were voting tomorrow, this election would be over, period.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that that's what we're seeing in the polls, which is why you hear all this clamoring on the Democratic side, Martha. Is there going to be another shoe that drops? Is there going to be another candidate? Well, now we have heard from Michelle Obama's office that she is squashing any talk of a White House bid. Quote, she will not be running for president. And they're saying she's supporting President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, when you look back among the Obama camp, David Axelrod, comments that have come from people close to him that they're concerned about whether or not Joe Biden can close the deal a second time, whether or not they can come up with another candidate. It certainly looks like this is going to be Biden versus Trump. I mean, that is absolutely what it feels like right now. But we're 9 months out. And there are a lot of things that can happen between now and then in these 80-year-old and 77-year-old candidates, not to mention these legal challenges that President Trump faces. But tonight, as we sit here, he absolutely is dominant in terms of securing the GOP nomination. A lot of questions, as we saw in those polls, about President Biden.
Breaking news today, the Arizona Democrat turned independent, Kyrsten Sinema, says she's not running for re-election at the end of the year, which leaves Kari Lake and Ruben Gallego in that battle for Senate in Arizona. Rick Wilson with Lincoln Project predicts no labels will choose Sinema to be their nominee, is what he puts on X tonight. Thoughts about Kyrsten Sinema?
I like Kyrsten Sinema. I like her politics. I like the way she litigated politics because she did it from the middle, a place where I think is where the strength is in politics. I'm hopeful she finds her way back into politics somehow. I don't know if it'll be through no labels, but we'll see what happens. To your point, the reason that I think Democrats, that Joe Biden thinks he has to go for the juggler the way that Brett let in, is because he's not able to hadn't been able to consolidate his base yet. If he's able to tell his base, this is the guy, the bad guy, they may come back his way. That's
we got a long night ahead. Drink some coffee.
We shall.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. See you in a bit.
Okay, it's time for Tuesday Extras, but we're going to do that on the move this time because we're in a different studio here in New York. You've got a number of studios. I'm going to make my way to Studio M for the special election coverage for Super Tuesday tonight. So as we walk, I'm going to do Tuesday Extras. Watch the door. Oh, there you go. Okay, first up, Kelly asked, do you have special rituals preparing for the night? Naps, special meals? How do you decide what outfits are for the night? Interesting to learn behind the scenes. Well, Kelly, there aren't that many choices for me. I do dark blue, red ties, maybe blue ties, so it's pretty easy. Women have a lot different situation. Up next, King David wonders, what living person in the world right now would you most like to interview? I used to always say the Pope, and I still do, but I actually think President Xi from China is who I am probably most angling to get. We're going to go down to the lobby. It's this complicated elevator system. We're going to wait for the elevator here, and I'll do the last question when I get to the ground because I've got to get to this other studio before we start, and I'll see you down there. All right, making our way to Studio M here for the special coverage. I've got one more question here. Moose Nose asks, 9th hole, Pebble Beach, 481 yards. What club do you recommend? If you could hurry, I've got a foursome pushing us. Good question. Driver down the left, 6-iron on the green, left side, 2-putt par. Listen, I'm going to go in to the studio, get ready for special coverage. We've got you covered all night long. Super Tuesday, fair, balanced, and unafraid.
It's the biggest night of the primaries, with showdowns all across America.
Get out and vote. Got to get out and vote.
We do have a country to save, but this is where it comes down to you.
Tonight, more than 800 Republican delegates at stake, and Donald Trump has his eyes on the final prize.
Get out, Joe. You're fired. Give me liberty or give me death.
God bless you.
But Nikki Haley insists she's the only one who can beat Joe Biden.
Thank you so much. Look at the chaos that is happening under Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
And the president looks to dispel any doubts about his strength.
America's democracy was at risk, and we saved it. Are you with me?
Our Super Tuesday election coverage starts right now.
It is 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and the first polls of Super Tuesday are closed. Welcome to the biggest night in the primary campaign in the election season, unlike we have ever seen before. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Brett Baer. It is Super Tuesday. The most states, the most delegates, the most votes on the line as both parties march towards a 2020 rematch, it looks like. At this hour, polls are closed in Virginia and Vermont. Vermont could be Nikki Haley's best chance to win a state tonight, thanks to moderate Northeast Republican voters and an open primary system.
Virginia is also holding an open primary, and she could do well in the suburban areas near D.C. Both states also host Democratic presidential primaries tonight, where Biden is widely expected to win.
Now, those are just the first prizes of the night. 16 states and 1 territory heading to the polls today, including the 2 biggest states, Texas and California. A lot of delegates there.
Indeed. On the Republican side, there are 854 delegates up for grabs tonight. That is more than 70% of what is needed to clinch the nomination.
Former President Donald Trump hopes to sweep them all 15 states on the Republican side, and set up a showdown with Joe Biden in the fall. He steamrolled through the early contests, and tonight he's hoping for a knockout blow.
Challenger Nikki Haley fighting tooth and nail to stay in the race. The math does not look like it is in her favor. She has no clear path at this moment to the nomination.
On the Democrat side, President Joe Biden wants another 4 years. He has also marched through the early nominating states, despite his party remaining deeply divided about the prospect of him returning to the White House, concerned about age, his mental fitness, other things.
Buckle up, everybody. We have reporters all over the country covering the candidates, the issues, the mood of the electorate in America. Our great panel is here all night. We'll kick things off with our man at the billboard, Mr. Bill Hammer.
Hey guys,
Hi, Bill.
evening to you. Let's buckle up, right? I mean, I think we're going to be here a while, aren't we? Nice to see you all. Let's do a little introduction of what we're looking at here on Super Tuesday as we get kicking off. Let me come back to this area in a moment here, because we're talking about the early poll closing. Think about Vermont, think about Virginia, think about those areas that 8 years ago were kind of soft toward John Kasich and sort of favorable to Marco Rubio. That's the areas we're kind of looking at so far tonight. So let's get this thing going here. This is Vermont. Right now, nothing is on the board. But if you went back 8 years, you would see where John Kasich did real well around the capital city and points to the west over there. Let's bump on down to Virginia, and I'll see. Yeah, give me a shot here. There we go. So nothing in just yet. All right. Hey, we said it was early, right? I mean, it's with a capital E. 8 years ago, this is what we saw in Virginia. We saw Marco Rubio in this sort of blue-teal color here doing really well in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. There's a big counties, big population, 1, 2, and 3 throughout the entire Commonwealth, located right here. We also did very well around Richmond, too, in the suburbs in Charlottesville off to the west. So those pockets could be right for Nikki Haley tonight to go ahead and get in there and get some delegates and maybe put up a bit of a challenge right now to taking the state of Virginia. The reason why we're doing this, if you go back to South Carolina, just, the last time we were together on that Saturday night, we tried to figure out where Rubio did well and maybe where Nikki Haley could do as well as also, but that was her home state, okay? And here's how it turned out. She won the capital city of Columbia and Richland County. She won her hometown of Charleston and also the county just the south of her. And if you went back 8 years ago, look what Marco Rubio did. This is kind of our benchmark that we were using on that Saturday night to give you a sort of a relationship to how we're judging how the candidates are doing. In the end, Rubio only won 2 counties, and then Nikki Haley won 3 this time. So she did a little better than we were back in 2016. Hence the reason why we look at places like Virginia tonight and also Vermont to see, maybe get an idea about which way they're going to go. Now, here's the thing about all these states. They all got different rules, okay? So pop out here to California, 169 delegates. Well, California has never gone this early in the process before, ever. It was always in June, and they came at the end, and they felt insignificant. Well, this year, a whole different approach. Now, it closes late into the night, 11 o'clock Eastern time, our time. They got a good Senate primary race out there as well in California. We'll see how it goes. But you see this tab right up here at stake, 169 delegates. We got a little toggle here that gives us a rule book. All right, and the rule book in California says majority take all. Think about that amount of delegates now. If you get 50% plus 1, you get all 169 delegates. So Trump, Haley, gunning for that. Utah, very similar as well. I just want to hit the rule book here. At stake, majority take all right, of the 40 delegates there in Utah. Come over here to Tennessee. This is where I want to make the point here, okay? In Tennessee, you go ahead and try and figure this one out, okay? This is like calculus or algebra. 31 statewide delegates, 2/3 take all. If no candidate gets 2/3, goes to proportional. To all of this stuff, okay? Each different state has its rules. Some are similar. Some are just, they seem like off the page to some of us. So as we kick off the night at 7:05, we are now rolling.
6-7, carry the knot.
Yeah, no math required.
If you can help me with that, or get Rove on the line.
The board's better. The board's better.
Bill's rolling.
Oh, he's rolling.
Yeah, he's rolling.
We should point out on the bottom of the screen, we have all the results that are coming in. You saw Iowa. That's because there was a mail-in for Democrats in Iowa, President Biden winning that. And you see Virginia there over Marianne Williamson. Millions of Americans heading to the polls this Super Tuesday. The Trump campaign is expecting to win, as we said, an avalanche of delegates. Aisha Hasni is at campaign headquarters at Mar-a-Lago, and it seems they're going to pack them in there, Aisha.
Hey guys, if you can't tell, there is a huge party underway behind me here in Mar-a-Lago. The doors are officially open and we're seeing a lot of folks streaming in now, and the feeling is electric here as the campaign expects up to 1,000 supporters here tonight in this ballroom. It really feels like a general election party, and quite so because tonight, Super Tuesday, could really launch the former president towards that magic number of 1215, very, very close to it. The campaign telling me they expect to sweep about more than 1,000 delegates tonight, including the ones they're walking in with tonight, getting closer to that magic number. Trump very much so wants to pivot hard to the general election. He certainly does not think that Nikki Haley has any sort of path forward here. He believes that he is going to win every single state tonight. But whether or not he's going to ask her to step down tonight, Fox and Friends host Lawrence Jones asked him about that this morning, and he wouldn't quite answer that question, so we'll have to wait and see how the night goes. He is, though, accusing her of dividing the GOP by just staying in this race. Now, he'd much rather be talking about the issues, the border, the economy. He'd much rather be talking about President Biden, and he'll get to do that again, Brett and Martha, in dueling remarks again this weekend, Saturday, in Georgia, when Trump and both President Joe Biden will be campaigning just about 60 miles apart. Back here in Mar-a-Lago, again, the party getting underway, just about 200 people, I would say, here already. There is no open bar, and there is a soda bar, a pop bar, if you want to call it, if you're from the Midwest, but no free alcohol, at least tonight here in Mar-a-Lago. Back to you guys.
Well, thanks for that update.
Sounds like it's going to be a short party.
Yeah, that's not a big party.
All right, let's bring in.
Will they get to 1,000 without an open bar?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's time to bring in the panel, if you haven't noticed. Brit Hume, Laura Ingraham, Dana Perino, and Harold Ford Jr. Laura, what do you think of tonight?
Well, this is
this is a big night. Even if they don't have the booze at Mar-a-Lago flowing, this is going to be a big night, obviously, for Donald Trump. He's cruising to the nomination. I think Nikki Haley, look, she has given it her all. She's crisscrossed the country. She's raised a huge amount of money. I think for the last year, she's pretty much represented the more kind of establishment old Bush wing of the party better than anyone. And she's attractive, she's articulate, she's very smart. She's tried to go at Trump. And I don't know how you could have done it any better than she did it. I don't think there's a big audience for that. There's some audience, but not enough, clearly, to really motivate the people to turn out to vote in the way she needs it. It's a populist party, and right now it's Donald Trump's party.
Brit, what do you think happens tonight?
Well, I'm interested in two things particularly. I'm interested in what Donald Trump will say tonight, and I'm interested tonight in what Joe Biden will say on Thursday night at the State of the Union address. I think those are the two big things worth watching. Whether Trump will be conciliatory, whether he'll be generous, whether he'll be reaching out to try to do what he says he wants done, the uniting of the party. As for Biden, we'll be watching to see if he doesn't fall off the rostrum.
Yep. Well, we saw he was very bitter towards Nikki Haley up in New Hampshire, and then conciliatory, but to the point of not mentioning her, really, in South Carolina, that he had moved on to the general election race. So we'll see. Very good point, what we're going to hear from him
Dana,
tonight.
we talk about polls. We don't usually talk about them going in, but Iowa's already happened. And there's a new poll out in Iowa, Des Moines Register, Ann Seltzer. She's very well respected with her polling unit. And it shows that former President Trump, head-to-head, has a 15-point lead on President Biden. And if you look inside that poll, the approval ratings for the current president down to 29%. This is Iowa, a place that was getting purplish, and just in the Iowa caucuses did not look like this head-to-head. These polls are moving across the board.
Oh, but didn't you hear the president say today that all the polls show that he's fine and everything's going to be just great? And I jest a little bit because we saw the polls over the weekend, terrible for the president, and they're consistent. 6 months ago, the Washington Post ABC poll came out, and it had Trump, I think, 8 or 10 points ahead. And the pollsters themselves said, this can't possibly be true. This is an outlier. No, it was the canary in the coal mine. Because now, what has Biden gotten tonight, at the end of tonight, when President Trump is a presumptive nominee, and it won't be too big of a stretch to say that at the end of tonight. Biden got his man. He wants to take on President Trump. He says he wants to go for the jugular. He thinks that he knows President Trump's weak spots. But they can't have the staff deliver the blows. President Biden himself will have to show that he can actually throw a punch and land a punch. And I don't know if we've actually seen him being able to do that in the last several months.
Yeah, Harold, that may become the question after tonight. What does a head-to-head race between these two look like at this point?
So I think two things. First, the polling also shows that most Americans don't want a rematch. But we find ourselves thrust into, it looks as if we're going to get the finale or the final blow this evening. Two, I think the American people find it more and more difficult to withstand one another if they don't agree with one another because of the way the politics is litigated. If you listen to both sides, the hatefulness, the viciousness, there's always been a little undertow of that in politics. But the campaigns are organized around name-calling, organized around reminding people of the worst of people. So if you believe that during a campaign, your voters have every right to wonder why after the campaign, why would you try to go do political business with people who are so bad, who are so evil, who are so un-American? So I'll be doing what Brit said he was going to do at the outset. I want to hear him tonight. He showed me an ability, he being Donald Trump, to be magnanimous in Iowa. I haven't seen it since. It seems like he's gone in a different direction. Maybe he thinks that's what's going to help get Governor Haley out of the race and begin this consolidation. The most time I saw him be magnanimous was yesterday when the Supreme Court decided what they decided. He talked about uniting his party and presumably uniting the country. Let me be clear. I'm not for him as president, but I'm for my country. And if he's elected president, we've got to find a way for people to want to do business together again, politics and everything else. So I'll be looking most closely at that this evening.
Okay. We have a call to make here. The Fox News Decision desk can now project the first call of the night that President Biden will win Virginia's Democratic primary. No big surprise hidden in that one.
Not a big surprise. You know, there is, Laura, these different races on the Democratic side. We saw in Michigan the uncommitted vote got a number of people turn out, more than 100,000 in Michigan. you see that he needs 1,967 to clinch the nomination. He will do it. But yet there is still this angst in the Democratic Party about their eventual nominee, President Biden, and whether he's going to be the nominee at the convention.
The question is whether the hatred of Trump is really enough to drive everyone they need to the polls. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But right now, they clearly have a problem with the far left. The far left is very unhappy with what's happening in Gaza. They're trailing around AOC, all the video you guys showed on Special Report tonight. That's an uncomfortable moment for them. But the question is, are those people really going to stay home? They're not going to vote for Trump, but are they going to stay home? If they do, and this is a close race, and it might be, that could turn it for Joe Biden. They're certainly not going to vote for Trump, but they're bitterly angry because they think Biden's not left-wing enough. And I think that shows you the danger that they initially embarked upon by making this deal with the far left. Biden wasn't that way, and he became that way.
If you look at the overall polling, it suggests that Trump basically stands about where he did 4 years ago. He hasn't lost ground. Biden has lost ground. And in part it's because of what Laura's talking about. It's also, I think, in part because voters have had a taste of his governance, and they're mad at him about immigration. They're mad at him about inflation. They're disappointed in him in a multitude of ways that began with the pullout from Afghanistan, from which he has never really fully recovered. So he has a lot of ground to make up with the voters who were with him 4 years ago, and who, at the moment at least, do not appear to be with him now.
And the Israel-Gaza part of the State of the Union speech will be interesting to watch, just because what he says about it, how he says, if progressives in that chamber react.
Yeah, will he go against the grain of many in his own party, not only on Israel, but also on Ukraine?
And he has yet to really articulate his argument and the Biden doctrine for why the country should go along with him on spending that additional money at this point.
Worth discussing, because when you think about it, we have all this vast panoply of programs to deal with all sorts of American issues. But what is job one of the federal government? Job one is national security and defense, foreign policy. It is the only institution we have to deal with that. The states don't do it. Private business doesn't do that. That's the federal government's chief job, and we now spend a fraction of what we did on defense during the Cold War. A fraction.
One other point, though, is in the cities where, you had Abbott and obviously DeSantis sending all these migrants to the cities. I think you're going to see some modest pullback from Democrats. Maybe, again, they won't turn out for Trump, but they might not vote for Biden. I think that was a brilliant move to spread the pain of the illegal immigration to the rest of the country. And I think that's going to have a big effect. It's the #1 issue in a lot of these states.
Trump said last night that he wanted to reach out to Democrat mayors. He said we have to fix the cities, and he wants to work with them. That's going to be interesting to watch.
He wants to do a rally here in New York. We're going to make another call. The Fox News decision desk can now project that President Biden will win Vermont's Democratic primary. Something tells me this is a trend early on in the night, that the president is going to win these states easily, and we can make those calls. You can see on the bottom of the screen, we're going to have all the states that have the raw vote total coming in, and we'll put those up for you. And when we can make a call on the Republican side, we definitely will do that. We're just getting started on this Super Tuesday. We have a lot to go. We just started all of these countdowns. The next set of polls closing, a big lineup throughout the evening as the results come in. Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity on deck as our special coverage continues here on Fox News Channel. Next.
Former Governor and Ambassador Nikki Haley looks to exceed expectations tonight. She has said that herself, that she hopes to prevent a huge Trump blowout this evening. Bill Melugin is following her campaign tonight in Charleston, South Carolina. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Martha, good evening to you. Nikki Haley's campaign tells us she is here in the Charleston area tonight, but is not making any public remarks, nor does she have any public events tonight. We're told she's going to have a private watch party with her staff, food, music, and we're told the mood there is, quote, jubilant. So we asked the campaign, what are their expectations heading into this Super Tuesday? They told us to be competitive. We asked, well, what does competitive mean? They said it's up for the media to decide that, but they point out that Nikki Haley's been getting chunks of voters in these early states. They feel there is an appetite for a non-Trump vote out there. However, the bottom line is, if she wants to get past Donald Trump, she has got to start winning some states outright. So we asked the campaign, are there any states they feel particularly good about tonight on this Super Tuesday where they feel they've got better chances? They told us kind of wink, wink. Take a look at the state she's been campaigning in recent days. So take a look at this graphic right here. This is a map of where Nikki Haley has been in the last week or so. She's been crisscrossing the country, 15 different rallies in all these different states. Some of the states you probably want to keep an eye on tonight are Virginia, Vermont, and Minnesota when it comes to her chances. But we are going to be in touch with the campaign. We'll be watching some of these early returns coming in, and we'll keep you guys posted based off what we hear. We'll send it back to you.
Hey, Bill, do you know if there's an open bar there?
No open bar, but we got a nice pier behind us and some boats and some fishing.
No,
so
at Nikki's party,
we'll
Bill.
Nikki's
Trump
party,
doesn't
we can't
have
get in
one.
there.
So
oh, at Nikki's party. No. I don't know. We'll put in a request and find out. We'll see. We'll see if it's like Aisha's event.
Investigative reporting.
Data point for
That's
the
good.
evening.
Bill, thank you. Let's bring back our panel: Laura Ingraham, Brit Hume, Dana Perino, and Harold Ford Jr. Harold, what do you think President Biden is looking at tonight? Obviously, he's going to tick through and get these wins. There will be some protest vote out there, and he's getting ready for the State of the Union on Thursday.
I think you said it best at the end, and Britt said it earlier, too. The State of the Union is where he thinks he's going to reset and restart this campaign. In a lot of ways, presidents have tried to do that when they've stumbled a bit and when they've had a difficulty conveying their message. It's interesting, when you think about Democrats and you think about the far left, and we've talked about how that's where the challenge is for Democrats to bring that group back. The challenge with Republicans, interestingly, is the Bush Republican. It's the moderate Republican. So each side has its challenge in trying to bring people back, too, if you're President Biden. 7 of the last 8 presidential races, Democrats have won the popular vote. They've won 5 of the last 8 when you take the Electoral College. That 7 of 8 is only relevant because as you look at congressional races and other things, you look at the fact that California and New York delivered Republicans the majority in the House this last cycle in 2022. You're going to have tough races. I'm looking at California closely, not just for the Senate race, but who are the Democrats that emerge in these? You know, they have those kind of open primaries. Some people call them jungle primaries, where everybody can get in. The top 2 vote getters face off in the fall. Will there be moderate or liberal Democrats that face off against some of those incumbent Republicans? I think these are the things underneath that I think are going to inform a little bit about how these races turn out, and even how this presidential race turns out when we get this head-to-head.
So, Dana, President Biden is, Trump has a plus 45 edge on improving border security. This week, we learned that Biden hadn't spoken to his border chief, Raul Ortiz, and nor the current one, Chief Owens, until he went down there on Thursday to Brownsville. What does he need to say to convince people on Thursday night? Because obviously he's going to have to address what he's doing on this issue.
What he is going to say, and a lot of the media will help him say it and amplify it, is that this problem wouldn't be so bad if Republicans would just work with me to help me pass more money, and they're the ones that killed the bill because President Trump told them to, and they're afraid of him. That's what he's going to say. Now, that will ignore 3 years of history and reporting. Like Rich Lowry had a piece in National Review this week that said President Biden's policy on the border started in February of 2021. He started with the executive orders. He wanted to dismantle everything President Trump had done. And in fact, if you remember, at this point during the Democratic primary, right before Super Tuesday, President Biden and all the nominees for the Democrats raised their hand and said that they would be for decriminalizing crossing the border. So if they want to try to ignore 3 years of history, they will attempt to do that. Now, Republicans have a challenge. They always have a communications challenge. They start at a deficit and they have to work their way up. But the fact that immigration is the #1 issue, surpassing the economy in 2024 as an issue, means that this is a deep-seated issue. People are seeing it where the pictures every day. I was surprised that Bill Maloogian didn't say, and look right behind me, there's more people coming across. Because every time you go to Bill Maloogian, there's people there no matter where he is. Yeah. And so you have a crime issue, you have an economy issue. People in America want a legal system that works. We want immigrants to come here. But President Biden, I believe, is going to try to demonize all Republicans. And he likes to tag all Republicans with that MAGA line, and I don't think it will work in the end, but watch him try.
Bill Melugin, I think, has a condo in Eagle Pass. So I'm not sure. Brit, really quickly, making U.S. safer, improving border security with independence, this president is completely underwater. I'm talking 20 to 75.
He is, and I think Dan is right that he's going to try in the State of the Union address to address the issue. And he'll make the very claims she cited about the bill that came out of the Senate. It was a bipartisan bill and did have a lot of things that, for example, the Border Patrol Union wanted to see passed. In fact, they endorsed the bill, and the Republicans ultimately rejected it. And I think he'll argue that point endlessly. And look, there's some truth in that. It at least gives him something to say. I don't think it's going to overcome 3 years of what people have witnessed with the streaming people across the border, almost seemingly unchecked. So I think it's a tough issue for him. But he, at least at this moment, has something to say.
But Republicans obviously point to H.R. 2, executive orders. They can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fighting this issue off the border since 1996 when Bill Clinton did Operation Gatekeeper and was actually really good on the border in San Diego. My first report ever was on the border. So it's an issue I think I know something about. And the fact of the matter is people have gotten really smart on this issue. They knew that the so-called bipartisan bill didn't include anyone with real credibility on immigration. If they were really serious, they would have brought in Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and said, look, we got to get something done. Sit down with us. What do you need? Because we want to get this Ukraine funding. We got to get this funding for Ukraine. What do you need? They never did that. That showed me from the beginning they weren't serious. They didn't really want a border bill. They wanted the issue politically. And I would submit tonight that Mitch McConnell handed it to them on a silver platter because this was not a serious effort from day one, regardless of the big PR buildup.
And Bill Clinton, in his State of the Union address, said, we are a nation of immigrants, but we're a nation of laws. And he got applause on all sides of
criminal aliens, he referred to them as, I believe. Yeah.
That's right. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. A live look across the country now as voters make their voices heard on this night of Super Tuesday. More from our Fox Decision Desk as we get more results in, or reporters on the ground, expert analysis across the board in studio. We'll be right back.
The Fox News Decision Desk can now project that former President Donald Trump will win Virginia's Republican primary. This was former Governor Nikki Haley's really best chance to win a state other than Vermont, with significant delegates at stake. So with this, he goes on to this first win tonight. He is predicting there could be 15 wins tonight. The former president is. As you look at the board, we'll see if that holds up. Speaking of the board,
let's go to Bill Hemmer and get a look at what happened in Virginia.
Good evening again. It looks like a tale of two states, really. I'm going to break this down for you in Virginia. Remember, the population centers in the northern part of the state up around Washington, D.C. This is Loudoun County right here, okay? It ranks 4 out of 133, so, you know, that's where the people live, right? About 5% state population. You see where Trump did so well. This might be part of the reason why you make such an early call. Okay, so that's impressive for the Trump team. Down here around Richmond, let me just go pop in here a second, see if I can nail this right here. Come on. Henrico County, okay, only 12% counted, but that's an impressive number there, about 60%. The reason I say that is because of what Rubio did 8 years ago, so let me come back to that moment. I want to show you what Trump's secret sauce is. In Virginia, you're going to likely see it in North Carolina. You're going to see it in Tennessee. You're going to see it in Alabama. You're going to see it in Arkansas, all across the country tonight. And that is the rules, right down here along the border with North Carolina. Let me just go tapping around here, okay? Keep your eye on this number here. You're almost 79% here. Hop on over to Halifax. You're at 89% there. I'll jump back over here. Brunswick County, 83%. Let me go down here toward the border with Kentucky and find out what we've got. All right, you're at 87%, a little closer here, 94%. Wow, I mean, he's just running up the score, guys, 92.5%, and on it goes in the rurals there in the state of Virginia, hence the reason why it's been called for Trump tonight. The Haley team thought, hey, if there's a chance we can win a state tonight, might be Vermont, it might be Virginia. Right now, Virginia is off the table. Let me just, while I got you, let me see what's happening in Vermont. I haven't checked this in some time here. All right, too soon the call. She has a slight lead. You've got about, 9% of the vote being tabulated so far. So we got a ways to go. We'll come back to Yeah, we'll come back to Vermont in a second.
Over to North Carolina.
Yeah, I was going to do that right here with 74 delegates in North Carolina because the polls just closed in North Carolina about 7-8 minutes ago. What Haley's going to try and do, again, population centers, remember? All right, this is Raleigh, this is Wake County. It ranks population-wise 1 out of 100. Okay, so there's 0 votes in right now, at least being reported there in Wake County. This is Mecklenburg, that is Charlotte. This is 2 out of 100. Nikki Haley has a slight lead there, but again, we're just talking about 500, 400, about 1,000 votes so far in Charlotte. The pattern I just showed you guys here in Virginia, like the rurals, just pop on down here to North Carolina. You're going to see similar numbers on this side of the border as we move throughout the night. I would expect here along the border with Tennessee and also along here along the Atlantic Ocean as well in the eastern side of North Carolina. That is Trump's secret sauce. That is where he wins. Tonight he's going to do it again, and we're going to see it state by state.
All right.
So let's go to Mark Meredith. As we have just mentioned, North Carolina's the polls are closed. We're waiting for more results there, but he's on the ground in Raleigh. Hi, Mark.
Martha, good evening to you. We are watching 2 major contests here in North Carolina. The first, the one that you and Bill were just talking about, the presidential primary, Nikki Haley and Donald Trump both making stops in the Tar Heel state, trying to get out the vote in these final days. But the second race, and one the entire country is going to be talking about by November, the race to be North Carolina's next governor. And here's why. You are likely going to see the 2 candidates for this Democratic and Republican challenge both come at each other from the extremes of their party. At least that's how they're going to try and portray each other. Republicans going in tonight were looking likely to back Mark Robinson, the state's lieutenant governor. Trump endorsed him over the weekend, even calling him at one point Martin Luther King on steroids. While Robinson appears to be a rising star within the Republican Party, he is still quite controversial. He's made a lot of controversial comments in the past on things like guns and gay rights, and Democrats in the state will try to weaponize those words against him if he proves to be victorious tonight. Democrats also having a number of different candidates to choose from for governor. Their incumbent Democratic governor, he is term limited. He threw his support behind the Attorney General Josh Stein, a 57-year-old vowing to campaign on climate change as well as the economy. But North Carolina, Martha, certainly a state a lot of people are going to be talking about between now and November. Martha?
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, we've been talking about immigration, but also crime is a top concern for voters all across the country. Alexis McAdams has a closer look at that. Good evening, Alexis.
Hey, Brett. Well, when you're out on the campaign trail, as you know, you talk to people and they speak about everything from violent crime to migrant crime. It's incidents like this on your screen that have people all across the country on edge, from smash and grab robberies in Virginia to brutal beatdowns out in California. These crimes that you're looking at there on the screen, you can see the guy waving a gun and the beatdown there in the corner. Those are just in the 16 Super Tuesday states, although the FBI says crime in almost every single category has gone down across the country in 2023. What do those stats really mean to people who have been victims? Not much, right? And this election, migrant crime is sitting in the national spotlight here. You can check out these mug shots with recent cases of migrants accused of committing violent crimes, including the tragic case of Laken Riley, which we've been talking about. The 22-year-old nursing student was murdered while out on a run in Georgia. Now, Jose Antonio Ibarra, who you see here getting arrested, who crossed illegally into the U.S. from Venezuela and had previously been arrested, is charged with her murder. Voters say they want change here when it comes to immigration and crime across the country. So now the White House has called for sanctuary cities across the U.S. to cooperate with ICE, but people say more needs to be done.
Alexis, thank you very much. So the Fox News Decision Desk can now project that President Joe Biden will win the North Carolina Democratic primary. Again, no big surprise on that front. Let's bring back in our panel and Harold Ford. Obviously, good to win. No doubt the president's happy with how this is going, but there's not a lot of surprises in there.
No, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised at any of these numbers. I think some Democrats will look to some of the battleground states and see what the uncommitted number is, if indeed Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, what they are adding up to. But it doesn't look like they're adding up to more than 10 points combined. You look back historically when Democrats or an incumbent has had a little bit of a challenge, these numbers are consistent there. The real issue, though, are the issues that have been raised here about the polling data. And I think you and Brett have both raised the upside-down nature on some of the critical issues with the economy. Incumbent presidents win oftentimes, if not every time, when the economy is good and people feel it. There are a number of politicians who've had decent numbers with the economy, but people didn't feel like they were doing well. they're at home. There are a number of people who will say crime numbers are coming down or statistics are coming down, but if you don't feel safe, stats don't mean a thing. So Democrats have to figure out how they not only craft the message, but how they go about making sure the best practices around the country of fighting crime and reducing homicide rates and reducing theft, they're able to bring some of those ideas to cities where people don't feel as safe as the numbers suggest they should.
Laura, what about that? The issue of how people feel. You know, when you're sitting at the kitchen table and you're doing the budget on the back of an envelope, people just feel it. And right now, credit card debt is on the rise, even though some of these numbers the Biden administration talks about are pretty good in the big picture.
Yeah, the bottom line, I think, is people feel unsafe on the streets, especially in cities like New York or D.C., where I live. And they also feel unsafe economically. It's unsteady, insecure. And just little things like buying chicken for your family for a dinner, going per pound, what it costs now versus what it cost 3 or 4 years ago. It is staggering. 21% increase is an enormous amount for an American family of the things they buy every week. That makes a big difference. So when they say, oh, well, things are better, well, they're better for maybe the top income earners, but it is not better for the middle class, and for good reason.
This is a problem, a political problem posed by inflation. Is that it's not just that the people who can't afford it feel it, the people who can afford it feel it, and they don't like it. And what's happened is we had a significant jump up in inflation that went on for several years. The fact that it's calmed down now is fine, but remember what it means. It means overall the prices are still rising, just not as fast. So it's an issue that I think this campaign, this Biden campaign, is going to have trouble working around, because it's there, and it's not between now and Election Day. People's sentiments about it, I don't think, are going to change.
Today, the president blamed greedy corporations for giving CEOs big bonuses, and that's the problem. That's why you have so much inflation.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot of that in the State of the Union address. Because,
junk fees.
So remember last year we were there. What's the most memorable thing? It's all about junk fees. So apparently they're going to say that every American has saved like $650 on their junk fees. Okay, but that doesn't deal. If you're not dealing with the junk fees every day, you're dealing with the grocery store every day, and that is what is really hurting people. And I think that he does have some things to talk about, right? Like President Biden can talk about insulin and the cost, figuring out a way to get that under control for a lot of people that have to buy that. He's going to tout something that I don't really like, but the prescription drug Medicare negotiations with the companies. He's going to say that I'm taking it to those companies. But again, when you go back to when he won, he was the person who was like, I am the regular Democrat. I am not the left wing of the party. And then, having beaten Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, he took all sorts of staffers that worked for them and placed them in his administration, which led to a lot of the policies that Steve Ratner, Larry Summers, other Democrats saying, whoa, guys, this is going to cause inflation. And they turned out to be right.
To Laura and Brit's point, a guy who I know well, who should not be worried about these things, about the steadiness. I ask him, what do you worry about the most? He goes, my refrigerator breaking. He goes, I got a big one. I'm not sure I could afford the jolt it would have. And this is a guy 4 years ago I would not thought to have said these things. So it's hitting not just people we think when we look at the numbers and the income share. It's hitting a lot more people than we think.
That number about just one thing, the emergency fund that people have, like regular people have emergency funds. They don't have an emergency fund. It's like 50% of the country can't afford a $1,000 unexpected bill. That's terrifying to live that way.
It is a Super Tuesday unlike any other, in part because of the pivotal role the Supreme Court is playing in this election. Our legal panel tackles that, plus more results from across the country, as our Super Tuesday coverage continues here on Fox.
You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that.
Former President Trump hailing a Supreme Court decision preventing Colorado and other states from kicking him off their ballots. It's one of the many legal challenges colliding with his White House campaign. Shannon Bream is in Washington with our legal eagles, Andy McCarthy and Jonathan Turley. Shannon.
Yeah. Good evening, Brett and Martha. And guys, if only we had something to talk about. There's nonstop legal stuff going on here. But let's start with that yesterday. The Colorado ballot, a winning argument for the Trump team, but they've got this immunity case. He loved the Supreme Court yesterday. I'm not sure he's going to feel the same way this summer.
Yeah, that's the problem with sequels, is they don't always go what you had hoped for. The fact is the odds are against the president on immunity. Now, it's true that once you get into that high grass of presidential immunity, you often don't know where you'll come out, because some of the justices may be concerned less with the result as they are with the rationale. That the D.C. Circuit itself was sweeping. It's not just Trump's arguments that are sweeping. And that may have given pause for some of these justices to say we need a little more delineation. But there's a very good chance, in my view, that they could end up sending the mandate back to the trial court in June, is the most likely. Then that would restart the trial, and they'd have to get through pretrial motions. But if it goes back in June, it's possible that you could have a trial before the election. And it certainly, in this case, the special counsel has said that he does not feel that he is bound by the longstanding policy at DOJ to avoid trials before an election.
Too close to the election. Yeah, but before we even get there, Andy, there's this matter of the New York trial that you got to get through. And the Trump team has sent a blistering letter to Alvin Bragg up there saying, you're proceeding with all of these trials and these things like Alan Weisselberg being in court again with a plea deal this week. And yet, in their words, you are allowing people guilty of brutal attacks on law enforcement and murderers to just roam the city free.
Well, it's a very, look, he's in a political battle as much as a legal one, and he's fighting it that way. And he's got a lot of ammunition with Alvin Bragg, who is the paragon progressive prosecutor and who does have a well-deserved reputation in New York for minimizing the number of cases they take and then taking the cases they have and pleading them down. Contrast this with the 76-year-old nonviolent Weisselberg, who he has now prosecuted twice in 18 months and is about to put in, I guess, Rikers Island for another 5 months.
So jury selection starts, we think, on the 25th. Jonathan, how well do you think that's going to go for the former president, who so far has not found New York's court system to be very friendly for him?
Well, it's not very friendly, and it's a nightmarish jury pool, only rivaled by Washington, D.C., which he will also face with a special counsel. And, you know, the fact is that even a hung jury in New York is quite an effort for the defense in a case like this. But Bragg is continuing to just pull out the stops. We just saw that in this case with the objections in the letter, that you get the feeling that he's running out and shooting the wounded before he gets to Trump. And the question is, at what point does a modicum of restraint kick in on any of this? But I think that the Bragg prosecution is the most flawed and questionable of all the cases. And I would be surprised if it could withstand appellate review.
All right, gentlemen, much more to discuss throughout the night. We'll get to more legal topics. Thank you both. Brett and Martha, back to you.
All right, Shannon, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, you guys. We are just moments away from the night's biggest set of poll closings. New results coming in from 5 states. Jesse Waters joins us to react as our special coverage of Super Tuesday continues. We'll be right back. Fox News alert. The Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Trump will win North Carolina in the Republican primary tonight. So another big win. And so far, all the states that we have been able to call have gone for former President Trump.
Remember, 1,215 delegates is what he will need. If he runs the table tonight, he will come just short, probably at 1,100. We'll see how it all goes. Depends a lot on California and the winner-take-all at 169. If that happens, the Trump campaign says it might be March 12th, it might be March 19th that he can mathematically clinch the nomination. It is 8 p.m. All the polls have closed in 5 more states. Too early to call all of these. Alabama, there you see, Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. Former President Trump adding Virginia, as we said, to his scorecard earlier this evening. Bill Hemmer's at the board. You're looking at Vermont. You say that it's interesting in Vermont.
I mean, about a week and a half ago, you said we're going to have any drama tonight?
Right.
And I said, we're going to find the drama. There is a story in Vermont. I find it very interesting. Too early to call. You got 15% of the vote reporting, okay? Donald Trump's at 50.3%. Why is that important? Because at stake are 17 delegates, but our rule book will tell us this. It's majority take all, which means you need 50% plus one. So if this thing were called right now in Vermont, Donald Trump would take all these delegates, all right? Nikki Haley she was above that 50% number and dropped down about 7 or 8 minutes ago. So if you don't get the majority, then it goes by proportion if you're at a minimum of 20% throughout the state of Vermont. Now, Brett, do not ask me to do this for every state, okay? Because I'm going to need an encyclopedia, and I'm going to need a calculator, and I'm going to need AI is what I'm going to need.
Can you go to North Carolina real quick?
Dial that sucker in, okay? Here you are in North Carolina. We've called this race now, okay? Look, the numbers aren't big, but we called a race with 3% reporting. The reason you do that is because you've been in the field and you know what the voters are thinking and how they're reacting. I told you she had to do well in 2 areas. It seems like early on now she is. That's in Mecklenburg County. That's Charlotte. I mean, paltry numbers right now, but a slight majority there. In Wake County, where Raleigh is located, you got a lot of places of education, higher education, where Nikki Haley seemed to have an appeal. We'll see how this goes right now. I mean, super early, just 845 votes in that tabulation. If we come back out here, okay, you got a lot still on the board, all right? And just hit 8 o'clock. Maine just closed. So did Tennessee. I was making the point about 15 minutes ago that in these rural counties in Virginia, Donald Trump's running up the numbers. We expect to see the same in places like North Carolina and also here in the state of Tennessee, although I just checked this. And so, I mean, it's a gray slate at the moment, but it'll fill in throughout the night. So, let me try and check this in North Carolina and just see if he's getting some of the numbers that I talked about there along this Virginia border. I would expect it to be the case. All right, you're at 76.7. Pop over here for more in a person. You're well over 80% there. Another county, Rockingham County. I mean, small numbers here, right? 58 and 12. You don't think much of it, but this is what Donald Trump will do across the country come November. And, well, okay, you're up 60% over here at the Tennessee border. All right, that's early. I mean, look, 2-point edge right there along the border with Tennessee. So we're off and going. I'll kick it back to you, but just for, okay, all right, Vermont. You're back at 51.0%. So that could be a critical number as we move throughout the night.
All right, we'll head back in moments.
Thank you, Bill. So it is 8:03 on the East Coast, and we'll bring in Jesse Waters, who is with us. Good to see you, Jesse. Good evening. What do you make of what you've seen so far?
Well, Brit Hume gave me some advice. He said, Jesse, don't make any more predictions. So I won't be making any more predictions ever. And with Dana's permission, I'd like to make an analogy. Donald Trump is like political helium. He keeps rising and rising and rising. But he's also combustible. And everyone's worried about when's he going to pop? Is it going to be sabotage, prosecutors, his big mouth? But so far, he's risen above DeSantis, Haley, and he's been beating the pants off of Biden in the polls since Halloween. And there's a few reasons. One is because American people don't like dirty cops. And Joe Biden's gang of lawyers jumped Donald Trump. It was 6-on-1. They're kicking him, hitting him with raids, with fines, with mug shots. And Americans don't like that. They want to see a fair fight. We can sense that kind of injustice. And the American people have been impressed with how Donald Trump's not only held his own, but has given it right back to him. So his strength has been impressive. Number two, Donald Trump is running against Joe Biden, the oldest, probably the most unpopular president that we've ever seen. And he needs to get it together. And that's not a book plug, although you can pre-order it on Amazon if you wish. But he's now experiencing the worst stretch of his presidency since Afghanistan. You've had his own Justice Department say he's too senile to stand trial. Immigration's been dominant. You have Biden migrants now murdering American women. The stench of his son is wafting into the West Wing. And he can't get one ally to fight harder, the other ally to stop fighting. And it's just too expensive. And it's too dangerous in this country. And now Donald Trump is harvesting voters from Joe Biden's orchards. He's plucking out blacks, Hispanics, women, young people, putting it in the basket of deplorables and going along his way. And these people are coming willingly. because if you policy, the contrast is so stark compared to what it was a couple of years ago. I just went out to get Jesse Jr. a birthday present. I wanted to get him a play gym. And I looked at the price tag of the play gym, Brett, and I passed out. And when they picked me up off the floor, they said plastic and lumber prices have tripled in the last couple of years. So now I'm basically paying for a second home to put in my backyard. And all it has is a slide and a swing set. And I'm just going to maybe just buy him a stick and tell him it's magic instead. It's too expensive. It's too dangerous. And the Republican Party is now more unified than the Democratic Party. And the Democrats are the ones on defense, having to answer for Joe Biden, having to answer about the border. They're trying to give the guy advice, and they're trying to tell him he might have to drop out. The Republican Party, for the first time I've seen in many, many years, is not constantly having to defend Trump controversies. And that's unifying the party, and if they can stay unified, I think they have a good shot at winning the White House.
You know, Jesse, you've spent a lot of time talking about the president and his own party having trouble with concerns about his age and mental fitness. He's upside down with independence on the border, on crime, on the economy. And we heard from Michelle Obama's staff today that she officially is not running for president. She is supporting President Biden and Kamala Harris. You've said maybe there's another shoe to drop in the Democratic Party. You still think that's true?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Brett, because if you read between the lines, she's not saying she wouldn't agree to be drafted at the convention in Chicago, her hometown. She's saying she's not running for president. So there is a chance, and I'm not just saying that to titillate the audience, or maybe I am. But I personally, if I was Michelle Obama, I would not want to go anywhere near the White House. I have a great life, and I wouldn't want Barack telling me what to do.
Well, you know, I think that.
Wow is right, Martha.
Wow
is right.
Wow. That's all I can say, Jesse. Just, you know, wisdom oozing out. So tell me something. You know, what do you think the plan would be, right? So when you look at these numbers that are extraordinary, as that Brett just pointed out, Biden is down 31 points, 47 points, 25 points. These are with independents, down 43 points in unifying the country. So is there any suggestion that they are genuinely looking for a plan B when they look at the way Trump is rolling up these states and they look at the national polls that we got from New York and New York Times Siena?
There aren't any party elders that can come in and tell Joe it's time to go. Joe is the only party elder left. And you know, you reach a certain age, you're stubborn. You're not going to just do what someone tells you to do. His wife's in it to win it. His son's in it to win it. And he feels like he's been able to beat Donald Trump before, and he'll do it again. You go into someone at that age's house and you try to adjust their thermostat, and it's World War III. Nothing can change. He's decided he's going to stick with it, and if he loses, it's probably better for the Democratic Party to lose with Joe Biden than to switch things out in a chaotic convention, leapfrog Kamala Harris, first black female vice president, and install a straight white male, Gavin Newsom, that could get licked by Trump himself when he could just keep his powder dry for 4 years and run in an open primary.
Well, Jesse, we appreciate the commentary and the use of the 8 o'clock hour.
It's my gift to you, Brett. Don't abuse it.
All right, final predictions for tonight. Is former President Trump going to rack up all these states, 15 in a row? And when do you think he mathematically clinches the nomination?
Well, that would go against the Brit Hume advice, so I'm just going to zip my mouth and say good luck.
All right, sir. Good luck on
the
playground. I mean, that's a big deal.
That's
I'll
a
pitch
building
in.
to do.
Thank you very much. We need all the help we can get. Thank you, guys.
Well, listen, we've got some calls. First of all, the President Biden is going to win in Alabama, but we can now project that former President Trump will win the Alabama Republican primary.
And the Fox News decision desk can also project that President Biden will win. Oh, he's also going to win Alabama.
He
Did we
is.
mention that?
Yeah.
Twice he's going to win Alabama. We can also project that former President Trump will win Tennessee's Republican contest tonight as well.
We're getting there. There it is. Alabama, 82%. It's early on, but we'll call that. The Fox News decision desk, again, will say that former President Trump can win Tennessee, and President Biden, you know what? They're winning a lot of different states. Tennessee, there you go. And then President Biden with Alabama. We're going down, ticking it one by one, but there are no surprises here in either of these calls, Alabama, Tennessee, Biden, and Trump. And what's setting up is a general election battle that we expect to see. We're adding a new panel, though.
Yeah, it's just like magic. We have swapped out our panel, and we have some big stars and wonderful brains to speak with you. Larry Kudlow is here, Kellyanne Conway, Jessica Tarlov, and Trey Gowdy. Great to have all of you with us this evening. You know, Larry, let me start with you, if I may. When you look at this situation across the country, right, this Laken Riley, young woman, lost her life in Georgia. There's a bill that is being moved through the House to work to make the country safer, essentially, from the infusion of violent criminals who are carrying out the crimes like the one that was against her. How powerful do you think that story is for people as they look forward to this election?
I think it's an explosive story. I mean, I think the larger issue is an explosive issue and may become the most important issue, the border, ahead of the economy and inflation. Very good chance of that. I think at this particular moment in time, it could well be. I mean, it's showing up in some of the polls. I think the death of this beautiful young woman is an equally explosive issue and an infuriating issue, and one that has made many Americans angry who don't understand why, even at this point, nothing is done to close the border, okay? And I want to make a point. We've done the research on this. There are several congressional laws signed by prior presidents, going back to Bill Clinton, that gives any president the authority to stop people at the border and to deport criminals back to wherever they came from. And the fact that President Biden has been unable to do this, he has been unable to take any actions in the light of what has happened to this beautiful woman and many others also, is, to me, baffling, infuriating, and it has become an explosive issue. It has become the #1 issue. And, you know, Trump has a good record on this, a very good record on this. Biden undid this record. This is not going to go away anytime soon.
You both worked for the former president. Kellyanne, what do you look for tonight?
I think Trump has had as good a 3 or 4 day period as he has in a long time, beginning with the 4 consecutive polls from very different outlets over the weekend, all showing the dominance against Joe Biden head to head, but the real dominance on who do you trust to handle the issues and who has improved the economic situation of your family versus hurt it. For a sitting president, Joe Biden, to have only 18% of those polled saying that he has helped them financially is pretty remarkable. That means that there's tripartisan support. You've got majorities of Republicans, Democrats, and independents all saying it's either the same or in most cases it's hurt. Then on Monday, you have a unanimous Supreme Court decision. Then today, he's going to have a sweep of Super Tuesday. I think Trump looks unflappable and these swing states look unflippable. And I think it brings us to a couple of questions, which is when you look at all the poll results so far, people made up their mind last year. And that is pretty remarkable. You have people who have said from the beginning, if it's going to be Biden and Trump, I'm going to focus on that now the way he has focused on it. And it means that he's able to speak with general election parlance on most things, like the border. This is not Donald Trump 2015 elevating it into the national consciousness when it's mired in single digits. This is him saying, folks, 8.5 million people have just walked in. The fentanyl is the #1 killer of 18 to 45-year-olds. 24,000 Chinese nationals. Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they here? The border has become a proxy for American voters who live thousands of miles away from the southern border, for the economy, for fairness, for sovereignty, and for security.
Jessica, we're not going to hear from President Biden tonight. He does have the spotlight Thursday for the State of the Union address. Do you think the warning bells are loud and clear for Democrats and in the Biden campaign about what Kellyanne's talking about here on immigration and on these numbers?
Absolutely. I think the last 3 weeks or so have been bullhorn level alarm bells that have gone off, really starting with Ezra Klein's essay about why he thinks that Joe Biden should retire a hero and that we should find someone else at a contested convention. I happen to not think that that is the safe way to go with this, because you're going to end up nominating someone who hasn't been battle tested. But you could see how seriously Joe Biden is taking it in the conversation that he had for the New Yorker piece, a huge profile on him, where he's defending him staying in the race. Not only does he say, no, I never considered getting out, he says, point blank, I'm the only one that's beaten him, and I'll be the one to do it again. And that is what Democrats want to hear from him. But having been now with you very fine people for a few primaries and a caucus, I really hope that the Biden campaign is looking at the results, especially the exits on the Republican side, as a roadmap for what the campaign has to look like. Because the Biden coalition is very different from the Obama coalition. It has changed. It's more back to what it looked like in the 90s for Bill Clinton, when you brought together moderate Republicans and independents and liberals. He doesn't have to be as concerned about lefty progressives. I hope for everyone's sake that the hostages are returned out of Gaza and we don't even have to think about what's going on in Israel like we do right now. But I'm not that worried about far lefties. Maybe a few sit it out, but they're not going to switch over for Donald Trump. I'm concerned about Nikki Haley's voters. So you look at the exits for GOP voters tonight who won't guarantee their vote for the nominee. North Carolina, 35%. Virginia, 36%. California, 33%. That has been consistent, that there's 30 to 50% of people who don't want Donald Trump but identify as a Republican or are voting in that primary. How can Joe Biden and his team make the case, talk about some of the things, of course, you talk about on your show, Larry, about the economy, to up those optimism numbers, which are going in the right direction, and there's always a lag from results to how you feel about it, to talk about immigration. Clearly he wants to. That bipartisan border deal is going to be a big deal at the State of the Union. And other non-traditional Democratic issues.
But I think coming home is really the question.
Yes.
Yes. Or staying home.
But
Will they
I
come
want
or
to bring
stay
Trey
home?
in here because you're from South Carolina. Nikki Haley's going to have decisions to make. She could potentially forge some kind of arrangement with President Trump to help bring those voters to him. How do you see this playing out? If indeed she drops out, which we don't know whether or not she's going to do that. So.
The speed with which she drops out determines what kind of conversation the former president would have with her. I mean, the talk has been pretty vitriolic, even by political standards. I mean, comments about dresses and your supporters need not apply. When you called Alabama, Brett, the first thing I thought of all the things in the world to think about, was Jeff Sessions. So if your first major cabinet position, you would tell us, you would admit you botched. So if we are moving to the general election, to your point, what do we do to get people who are apprehensive about President Trump to come home? So, when you're winning, act like you're winning. Tell jokes. Don't comment on what people have on. Don't call people bird brain. The other thing I would do is say, look, you're worried about chaos? Don't worry about chaos with my second term. This is what my cabinet would look like. If I'm President Trump, I am magnanimous, like he was when the Supreme Court unanimously ruled his way. He said, look, use the ballot, not ballot bans. Use the people, not prosecutors. That was a conciliatory general election speech. If he can keep doing that, I think he's got a real shot.
He said today on Fox News, we need to unify the party. And among independents, Biden is seen as unifying the country. 20% mostly succeeded, 75% mostly failed. It's Trump saying this morning on Fox News, Nick, I hope that we can unify the party.
Can I just look at the New York Times Siena poll, okay? Of those who voted in 2020 for Trump, 97% intend to support him this year. 97%. What's left over there is what, I don't know, the Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, John McCain, may he rest his soul in peace kind of thing. When you look at the Democratic side of those voted for Joe Biden in 2020, only 83% intend to vote for him, according to the Times Siena poll. So I would suggest that Mr. Biden has a bigger problem unifying his party than Mr. Trump does. And as Trump goes into this working class coalition which is African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, even women, even young people now. I think he's the one that's encroaching into Democratic territory.
10% of that Biden vote said they want to support Trump.
Yes.
10% of them.
Well, we're going to make some calls. The Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Trump will win the Oklahoma Republican primary.
And the Fox News decision desk projects that President Biden will win the Oklahoma Democratic primary.
There we go. And also, President Biden wins Maine. This is a theme here. We're just going to keep turning. President Biden wins Massachusetts.
And we are counting down to a new set of poll closings that are coming up, including several states hit hard by the migrant crisis, how that issue could impact the vote. Sean Hannity on that and more as our special coverage continues. More Super Tuesday news for you. The Fox News decision desk can now project that Attorney General Josh Stein will be the Democratic candidate for governor in North Carolina.
Not yet, Governor. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson will be the Republican candidate. Mark Meredith following this story and others in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mark?
Brett, your old stopping grounds here in Raleigh, and we are about to see the kickoff of what is likely to be the most consequential governor's race this cycle. And as you and Martha were just talking about, we now know who's going to be leading on the Democratic and Republican tickets. Let's start with the Republicans. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson was the person that Trump endorsed in this race. Trump just backed him over the weekend, and Robinson was already considered the favorite going into today. But this is a candidate is still a relatively newcomer to the state political scene. He's only popped up within the last 5 years or so, and already we're seeing the Democrats trying to label him as an extremist based off some of his comments that he's made in the past about gay rights as well as abortion. Democrats also very eager to make abortion a big issue in the state. As you mentioned, the Attorney General is going to campaign on that, Brett and Martha. Now we'll see between now and November. Guys, back to you.
Mark, thank you. It is the top issue when voters are asked about their biggest concerns right now, immigration. And the polls are about to close at ground zero for the border crisis. Texas, a state with a huge delegate haul. Rich Edson is reporting live at the border in Laredo, Texas. Hey, Rich.
Hey, good evening, Brett. Well, the Texas primary is tonight, but what's going on behind me at the Rio Grande River at the border has national political consequences. That's because you had historic highs of border crossings under the Biden administration, and with that, you've now had immigration and border issues ranking among the top concerns among American voters in a series of polls. Republicans and former President Trump say President Biden should reverse his executive orders upending Trump border policies. Biden says he needs Congress to act, and Trump is preventing Republicans from compromising to help his election chances. Trump's Republican challenger, Nikki Haley, has also ripped the former president for opposing that bipartisan Senate deal on the border. Both Trump and Biden visited the border last week, both on the same day. Democrats are also trying to unseat Republican incumbent Ted Cruz. About 10 Democrats are running in the primary here. Some of the polls have already closed. They are also a little bit open on the western end of the state, closing soon there. Biggest delegate haul among any state here for Texas. Only California has more delegates to offer. Brett?
Rich Edson live in Laredo. Rich, thanks.
So a lot of discussion, obviously, tonight about Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, the Republican nomination. We see how strong the former president is, obviously, tonight. And then there will be a lot of questions about what happens next for Nikki Haley. She's not going to speak tonight. But Kellyanne, your thoughts on what takes shape when this nomination is wrapped up? Look into your crystal ball a little bit. What do you think?
Well, Nikki Haley ran as a Republican for president, so I would hope that she is willing to step up and attack Joe Biden with the sort of alacrity and viciousness that she's been attacking Donald Trump of late. I know it can happen. And I'm fairly confident that he can bring her back in because he did this in 2016, Trey, to your point. You have to bring everybody back. Rick Perry, Ben Carson ran against him for the nomination. He put them in the cabinet. Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Scott Walker, Chris Christie, certainly. Marco Rubio all ran against him. We're all allies of ours, really on the daily, policy-wise, and in the case of Governor Christie, a very close personal friend of the Trumps all that time. I'm really vexed and perplexed by what's happened with Nikki Haley because she's a close personal friend of Jared and Ivanka's. They posted pictures publicly of visiting her in Kiowa Island in the summer of 2021 with their children. There were people in the White House trying to kick Mike Pence off the ticket as vice president in 2020, a foolish idea that Donald Trump never supported, but there were those trying to do that to replace Mike Pence with Nikki Haley. So I don't want people to be fooled that Nikki Haley and Donald Trump weren't odds or weren't allies before all this happened. I think one important thing to note for Nikki Haley, who did have a big event sponsored by Charlie Kushner, Jared's father, at his beach house for her, and where he announced she'll be the first female president of the United States. I think he meant sometime down the road, I'm sure. But when I look at Nikki, the more she's attacked Trump personally, the more her unfavorables have climbed. She's somebody who was seen as middle-of-the-road unifier. Women are often seen as consensus builders, great negotiators, generally interested in what the other side thinks and how to come to a deal. And I feel like the Nikki I know has been going in the opposite direction. So I'm hoping very soon she'll come back. I'd love to see her at Mar-a-Lago talking to President Trump, figure out a way to bring some of those voters back in the fold. But if you're a close personal friend of the First Order and her husband, I would think that you're not too far afield from coming back into the Trump orbit.
And for the former president, you both worked with him. Is he in that mindset, do you think? Bring her back in?
Look, he could be, and I think he will be. He's a very smart guy. He's a very good negotiator. He understands how important it is to unify the party, and then some, because he's going to edge into the Democratic Party. But the mistake that Nikki Haley is making, besides the ones that Kellyanne mentioned, she's actually out there blaming the Republican Party. She's now running against the Republican Party. The Republican Party is Donald Trump's party. As I said earlier, it's not the party of college professors and elites and Silicon Valley billionaires. It's the party of working folks. And he's building this broad-based coalition around that theme. And they want to have a better economy, they want to have safer streets, and they want to have a safer border and restore America overseas. She can't just run against the entire Republican Party and then hope to be welcomed back into the fold. That's a mistake she's made in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. Now, can that be patched up? Of course it can. I'm old enough, or I'm of a certain age, to remember that John F. Kennedy got it back with Lyndon Baines Johnson, and I've seen even weirder things in the Republican. I used to be a Democrat, by the way. I've seen even weirder things in the Republican Party.
Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush as well.
That's
our Fox Decision Desk getting ready to make some new race calls as the Super Tuesday polls close. Our special coverage continues. Live from New York. Next.
All right, ready to make another call now, and we can project that former President Trump will win Maine's Republican primary tonight.
The Fox News Decision Desk believes we do have a very close race in Vermont. Nikki Haley is performing well in suburban areas as expected, the former president dominating rurally. Haley actually has a chance to win her first state of the primaries here. She did win the District of Columbia over the weekend. Let's head over to Bill Hemmer at the board. This is a barn burner in Vermont.
And indeed it is. Yeah, with a capital B at the moment. Remember we did the keys to this race right now with the 17 delegates up in the right-hand corner. If you get majority take all, so if you get to 50% plus one, you get all 17 delegates. The last time we checked in on this, Donald Trump had a slight lead, but look what Nikki Haley is doing now. It's about 134 votes, margin of difference 0.6% right now in the state of Vermont. You scan the country tonight, right, on the Super Tuesday. A lot of people thought Nikki Haley had a chance in Virginia. That has not happened. A lot of other people thought she had a chance in Vermont. It's possible right now, if she hangs on to this slight edge right here, that she would get some delegates and also get a state victory. So as we come out here, this is everything we're doing on Super Tuesday, and it might be Vermont, might be her best chance to win a state during this primary season. So stand by, more coming up on that.
Definitely, and we're tracking the delegates as well. Let's bring in Karl Rove now. Karl, Super Tuesday, you've been through a lot of them. What are your thoughts on this one?
Strong night for Donald Trump. We've got the big enchiladas yet to come in the form of Texas and California. But I wouldn't be surprised if, given what he's doing in the rest of the country, he didn't take California, where if you get 50% plus one, you take all of the delegates. So a very good night for him. And it's in all likelihood his campaign's projection that they're going to win a majority of the delegates by either by later in the month, the 19th at the latest, is probably accurate. Having said that, the high command of Team Trump ought to be concerned about unifying the Republican Party, because as we see in the in these states, a third of the vote in Virginia, 43% of the vote in Massachusetts going to Nikki Haley, a quarter of the vote in North Carolina. Maine has now dropped down to about a quarter of the vote, but it was 31% for Nikki Haley. Vermont, 48%. There's still some work to be done to unify the Republican Party, and that's going to depend a lot on his tone tonight and whether or not he stops doing things like calling her bird brain and threatening that if you give money to her campaign, you're going to be permanently banned. And we'll see how he does tonight. He did well in Iowa with his victory statement, unifying, humble, gracious. Not so good in New Hampshire, and tonight is going to be the big night, and he's going to set an important tone for either a unified Republican Party or a divided Republican Party.
Yeah, Carl, I remember the night that Ron DeSantis dropped out and he endorsed former President Trump, and quickly. I spoke with the former president that night in New Hampshire, and he said, well, you know what, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad for the endorsement. Can you mend fences? Yeah, probably. We all see a lot of very dirty political language that flies around, and it's maybe more so now than it ever has been in the past. But what do you think he needs to do to unify the party besides, giving a nice speech? I mean, literally in terms of where he goes and who he says he will work with. How does that look?
Yeah. Well, first of all, stop the bad language, because you're right. Ron DeSantis offered him his endorsement. President Trump had kind words to say for him. Then there was a leaked report of supposedly DeSantis off the record saying things in a private meeting that were disparaging of the former president. And the president's co-campaign manager, a terrific guy, a personal friend of mine, went out and said, all we're going to remember about Governor DeSantis is chicken fingers and pudding lips. And that's just not the way to go about doing it. J.D. Vance, one of the former president's big surrogates, put out a statement saying, if you are not being supportive of Trump and the candidates he endorses, don't bother showing up on my doorstep and asking me to help you on legislation. I have a long memory. Well, that's the kind of thuggish thing that most politicians, even if they believe in keeping enemies lists, they don't go out and say it in a tweet. And yet that was one of the president's, the former president's strong supporters, the junior senator from Ohio. That stuff has got to stop. The presidential candidate sets the tone, for good or for ill. It's up to him to be the one who's gracious, who's the adult, who does everything he can to unify, because in 2020, 1 out of every 10 Republicans broke for Joe Biden, and Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes. If 20% or 15% or 12% of Republicans break, that's not going to be helpful to him in the fall. So he's got to set the tone, and the best way to do that is to start out tonight.
Carl, really quickly, this is a primary. There's still opponent here. There's a candidate in the race. When you get to a general election, obviously, there are two candidates, and it's a choice. And in independents, President Biden is down on helping the working class, improving the U.S. world image, handling the economy, making U.S. safer, improving border security, unifying the country. I'm not talking just down. He is upside down by about 3/4, 75 to 20. Do you mean to tell me that all of those voters are saying that they're not going to come home? Even though this is a primary, you don't think those Republicans are going to come home and vote either for President Trump, but they're not going to vote for President Biden?
Probably not. But remember, in 2020, the Libertarian votes in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, Joe Jorgensen, the nominee of the Libertarians, got more votes than Donald Trump lost by. So the best thing to do is bring everybody home and bring them home earlier rather than later. And the way that you do that is by setting a tone and following it consistently through the balance of the spring and into the fall and into the convention. And look, it's not easy. Having been through this, I mean, there were a lot of hurt feelings in 2000 on the John McCain side. And it's hard to do, but you got to do it if you want to win.
Karl Rove, as always, thank you. The Fox News Decision Desk can now project that former President Trump will win the Arkansas Republican primary, and also the Decision Desk can now project that President Biden will win the Arkansas Democratic primary.
So we are just a short time away now from our next set of polls closing on this Super Tuesday. Sandra Smith is standing by with a closer look at the issue that the presidency often hinges on, the United States economy. Our special coverage continues next.
Super Tuesday results are rolling in, and the economy, as always, is a key issue. Sandra Smith has a closer look at this. Good evening, Sandra.
Hi, Brett. Hey, Martha. I'm calling it the tale of two economies because it's something we're talking about every day. We are on the Super Tuesday, and we will into general election. There's the economy the administration likes to tout, and there's the economy everyday voters are feeling, and they certainly are today as they head to the ballot box. This is what you hear from the administration. They tout the unemployment rate coming down, more people getting into the workforce. It's a promising sign for sure. Jobs added, 15 million of them, 10% since Biden took office. Wages are finally moving up 15%. Again, another promising sign. The stock market hitting record highs and new home sales prices. Okay, this for most Americans, this is the largest asset that they'll ever own. If you owned a home when Biden took office and you still own it today, you are seeing appreciation of that asset. However, this is the economy so many Americans are feeling today. And what you see show up in those polls where people just don't feel good about the economic environment right now. Those prices are up 17%. Food prices, you see this at the grocery store. Gas prices since Biden took office at $3.36 today, $2.39 when he took office, up 40%. Home sales. Larry Kudlow will tell you about what he writes about the affordability crisis. Home sales are down 26% over 3 years, and real wages, this is when you account for inflation, they're actually down 2%. And I'll finish off with this one, guys, this 46%. This is credit card debt, Brett and Martha. And this is a really big warning sign to a lot of the Wall Street economists right now who are looking at this economy and warning. $1 trillion in credit card debt. More and more Americans are racking this up right now. It's something to watch for sure as we head towards November. Back to you.
Great stuff. Sandra, thank you.
All right, let's bring in Larry Kudlow on that note. And Kellyanne Conway is with us, Jessica Charlov, and Trey Gowdy. Larry, you look at this economy, you look at how expensive everything is. We have talked about it. Instead of addressing it from the White House as we understand that you're still in the throes of this and we want to show you how we're getting you out, they kind of just keep telling people that the things that they're feeling aren't real.
Well, I think that is a communications problem. But I think the point that Sandra made is the affordability crisis issue. It's very average weekly earnings adjusted for inflation. Average weekly earnings. Stay with me on this, okay? When he came into office, were $399.88. Today, they're $380.44. I just note this. So it's a drop of a little over 5%. That's a killer. It means you're getting a pay cut. And it's essentially what's happened here. The Trump numbers are much better. No matter how you slice them, they're significantly better. So that's not the only thing going on in the world. All right, you've had very good technology movements. The AI revolution is a possibility. Corporate profits. Joe Biden doesn't like corporate profits. He's out there setting up a task force to go after businesses once again. But anyway, business profits are helping the stock market stay afloat. That's a good thing from 135 million Americans. Business profits help the economy. But the affordability issue, it just hits you right in the gut. And that is where Donald Trump hits the hardest. I mean, he's learned how to do that, and he did that back in 2016, and he's going to do it again right now. Inflation took its toll, and even though it has simmered, it is still taking its toll.
Jessica, we're going to hear a lot about this in the State of the Union address. We're going to hear a lot about the positive economic numbers, and they've been kind of talking about that from the podium. But to Larry's point, when you sit at home, and we talked about this earlier, how it feels is a different thing. And we're seeing that disconnect in some of these polls.
Definitely. It's not a sexy slogan to say we have the best recovery of the G7, right? That doesn't mean a lot to people except for us who can talk about, break it down and talk about the jobs numbers and the unemployment and the record oil production and those things. But that's not going to resonate in the same way. And I'm part of the elder millennial sect of America that couldn't buy an apartment when we were ready to, or we thought that we were. We were really proud of what was in our savings account. And then with the interest rates and the mortgage rates, it became unaffordable for us to do it this year. And I'm not complaining. We do well, and I can luckily afford to keep renting in the city. But that's astronomical because of an inventory problem. And This is real life to people who support Republicans and who support Democrats and who are independents. But it definitely has to be messaged better. And that's something that I've been really concerned with, because I feel like the messaging has only been tailored to a certain group of people who agree with you on everything, not people who might be open to somebody else or someone who's hanging in the middle saying, like, really make your case to me. But I do think that there is something important going on tonight. And obviously the story is more interesting on the Republican side because there's a real challenger in that. But Joe Biden is cruising through this thing tonight. I mean, we're seeing numbers 90%, 91, 92, 93%. No, I'm old enough to remember when we thought Dean Phillips was a thing, right? Or we're tracking how many uncommitted voters you have. The Democratic Party is showing up and they're saying, Joe Biden's our guy and we're good with it. And that does not square with those numbers we saw out of the New York Times Siena poll, for instance. And I'm not someone who is going to sit here and question the methodology of it, but it does make you think, if it's November 5th, all those people that are showing up in Arkansas and across the country for Biden in those numbers, sending a clear message, we're with Biden on this, and that isn't going to change.
We'll see where that goes. I mean, it's really you think about how long this general election is going to be. It's pretty staggering. I mean,
yeah. 8 months is like
8
50
months.
years.
That's right. We can report
less time than it takes to have a baby.
There you go. Well, I can't speak to
That
that.
also feels like 50 years. I'm almost done, though.
Former President Trump is racking up the wins tonight. We can check in with the Mar-a-Lago watch party. We can report that he is going to speak. We don't know exactly when, but we do know that Sean Hannity is here, and he's going to speak as our special coverage of Super Tuesday continues after this.
All right, we are back with the Fox News alert in Texas. The Fox News decision desk can project former President Trump will win the Republican primary in the state of Texas. That President Biden will win the Democratic primary, and Texas has the second highest number of delegates at stake for both parties tonight, so a lot of delegate haul for Biden and for Trump.
Let's go
in
up to
Texas
the
tonight.
northeast, up to Massachusetts. The former president will win the state of Massachusetts, and we are watching closely this story out of Vermont. Still too close to call. The Fox News decision desk believes we have a very close race there. As you can see, it has flipped to the former president. Here is the state of the race on the Republican side so far tonight. The delegate count 297 to 43. There you can see all of the states that the former president has won so far, and the District of Columbia in Nikki Haley's category. Let's go back to Aisha Hasni. She's at Mar-a-Lago down in Palm Beach, and it sounds like the crowd is getting ready to hear the former president at some time.
Yes, they are. Good evening to you, Brett. And I was just about to turn around and look because the crowd was cheering very loudly because you just announced another state taken by the former president. And so every single time we see that, the crowd goes wild. And it's the room has filled up quite nicely. Not the 1,000 people that we kept hearing throughout the day, but definitely several hundred are here tonight. I've seen Congressman Byron Donald, Florida. I've seen Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene here. Pam Bondi is here. Some folks, staffers from the state legislature are here. Moms for Liberty. A lot of different types of Trump supporters are here, really supporting the president. The crowd is jubilant. There they go again. Very excited. Now they're cheering for us, I guess. I was able to ask if there is alcohol here, and there is. There is a cash bar, though. There is a cash bar, and I was able to ask the campaign if they're going to maybe pop some champagne later tonight. They said they'd get back to me.
That's good. Well, at least they're watching the right channel.
Well, yeah, and they obviously have a lot to celebrate even so far tonight as we wait for some more states to come in. Let's bring in Sean Hannity. Sean, good to have you with us. You know, it is remarkable, Sean, on this Super Tuesday, when you look back over the last several years and all of the times that many, many people looked at this situation and did not see the incredible resilience of Donald Trump, of this political figure, and his extraordinary commitment to doing this over again, despite the fact that every arrow in the quiver had been thrown and fired at him over and over and over, Sean.
You know, the term I use, and I know I repeat myself, but I think it bears repeating, is we're really watching history. Let me start there. but Donald Trump defies all conventional political gravity. None of the rules that we thought would apply to any presidential candidate apply to him. And we see that he gets indicted, his poll numbers go up. He gets arraigned, his poll numbers go up. He gets a mugshot, his poll numbers go up. The more they attack him, the more he seems to galvanize support around the country. What's fascinating, and I know you've gone over a lot of polls tonight, one that really stood out to me was 10% of Biden voters are now voting for Donald Trump. Look, you have the New York Times Siena poll, you have the Fox News poll, you have the Wall Street Journal poll, CBS, he beat the 50% threshold. And then you look at Gallup, he's at 38%, an approval rating that is near record low for an incumbent president. Very difficult to overcome. You look at the ABC poll, you've got 86% of Americans thinking that he's not strong enough cognitively to be president. He's too old. That shows up in pretty much every poll. Then you've got to look historically. What do we always look at in election years? What drives elections? What drives people to the polls? Usually it is peace and prosperity. Okay, well, how are things looking around the world? We've got war in Europe. We've got war in the Middle East. We have a president seemingly in conflict with our #1 ally in the Middle East, that, of course, being Israel. On the other hand, he's done everything he can do to turn a blind eye to the Iranians selling oil, some $90 to $100 billion worth, and, of course, offering $6 billion in a trade for hostages, allowing a payment from Iraq for $10 billion. That's insanity to me. So then you go to the economic front. We now are living in an America where 60% of our fellow Americans, and I've been there early in my adult life, it's not a fun place to be, are living paycheck to paycheck. And many people are putting bare necessities on high-interest credit cards. It is a very tough time. For all the talk for the many months about Bidenomics, and we suspect, and we keep hearing leaks, that the president will talk a lot about corporate greed and shrinkflation in his State of the Union address. They have tried that message, and he is way upside down on the economy. People do not feel that they were better off than they were 4 years ago. There's so much anecdotal evidence that really points to an opportunity for President Trump to really make history in 244 days. That will come very fast. That will happen very fast. It's going to be fascinating. Let me throw a few polls at you, if you don't mind. I'll put my glasses on. Look, if you look at climate change, you have most Americans, by an overwhelming majority, think Joe's policies have mostly failed. Americans don't want EVs thrown at them. They would like their gas-powered vehicles. They don't want their stoves taken away, their refrigerators taken away, and they don't want their air conditioners taken away. Okay, so he's not even doing well on that. If you look demographically, what do we see? We see African Americans, Hispanic Americans, young people, suburban women in larger and larger numbers. All of these demographics comprise a very large part of the Democratic coalition or the Democratic base. Donald Trump, as of right now today, 244 days out, is doing very well with those constituencies. Look at Donald Trump with African Americans. Look at the poll. All demographics, he's at 28% with African Americans. That's massive. If you look further, working class Americans, 58% of them believe Joe Biden's policies have failed. Has he improved our image on the world stage? 61% of Americans give him a fail grade. On the economy, 61% give Joe Biden a big F. Do you feel more safe and secure? 63% think Joe Biden's, policies have failed. Unifying the country, 69% think he's failed. And on the #1 issue that we have all covered from Iowa onward seems to be immigration, and you have a whopping 71% of Americans that did not buy the 3 years of lying that the border is secure and the border's closed. Now, as of tonight, this is now a new race. This is now President Trump. He will win the Republican nomination. He will have an opportunity to become the 47th president of the United States. And I believe these are the policies, these are the issues that will define what happens 244 days from now.
Sean, a couple of things. Karl Rove was talking about how the party needs to come together and unify, and he brought out his whiteboard and pointed to all these states and all the people voting for Nikki Haley, some of whom said they had a problem with Donald Trump and weren't going to vote for them. I pushed back and said in a general election, which is going to happen very soon, whether he clinches March 12th or March 19th, he's going to be the Republican nominee. It then is a binary choice. And so to your point, you know, how people felt in the Trump administration about the economy, about the border, about world affairs. Do you think that those people voting for Nikki Haley, Republicans, will come home in a general election when it is a binary choice?
I think most of them will, not all of them. But let's go back to one number that really popped to me, and that was 10% of 2020 Joe Biden voters. They are saying publicly to pollsters they're going to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. That's how dissatisfied they are. Now, that presents a challenge to the president. I would say be magnanimous in victory tonight. Look, running for president is really hard. Every single person over all the years that I've done this, and by the way, I love nights like tonight. Don't you guys love these nights?
We do.
I will be up at 3 o'clock in the morning and still watching our coverage. And if it's a replay, I'll be watching that too. And it's just a fascinating process to me. And so I think, yeah, on the other side of that coin, you can look, I would say, okay, some of the demographics that are part of the Democratic coalition, I think some of them will go home. But if Donald Trump could even hold 20% of that number that he's showing now in an increase, that would be enough to be a significant win come November 5th. On the other side, I do think that the president has an opportunity to unite the party. And I think the message has to be there are more things that unite us than divide us. We agree on border. We agree on law and order. We agree on energy independence. We agree on peace through strength. We agree that Joe Biden's policies have failed. We believe that the American people deserve better. And maybe the president at some point will reach out to all of his primary opponents and invite them to join him and help him even to the extent that they're willing to, for the sake of the American people, unite around an agenda that will help our economy, help America on the world stage, bring us more prosperity, bring peace around the world, and also put America safe. And please secure our borders. Please get our budget under control. We cannot spend like this, and we cannot have tens of thousands of people from China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Egypt, and Afghanistan coming into this country without being vetted. That is the biggest national security threat I think we've ever faced.
Sean, just real quickly, you know, if, as it clearly looks right now, Donald Trump becomes the nominee for the GOP, how much does that galvanize, you know, just watching some of the other coverage earlier tonight? People very, very deeply unhappy, upset that this is where we are 4 years later. And how much does that energize and galvanize the opposition that has come after this former president so vociferously and so nonstop for all these years, Sean?
I honestly, at this point, I don't think there's anything left to throw at the guy.
Right.
They have thrown everything in the kitchen sink at him. And he's still standing, and he's not only standing, he's standing strong. Look, I have a lot of good things to say about a lot of his primary opponents. I really do. And I respect all of them. Anybody that steps into that arena, it is a blood sport. I think you both know that I'm into mixed martial arts. You step into the octagon, I give you full respect. It is just very hard, and none of them suspect that they're going to lose. However, there comes a point, why did you get into the race? If you got into the race because you believe in the dream that is America, you believe it's our duty and obligation to hand off this country better than we inherited it, then I think that is a galvanizing force that could transcend all politics. And I would urge everybody that ran, and President Trump, they don't have to be best friends, but they can agree on the fundamentals that certainly would reverse the downward trend that Joe Biden has taken the country in. And by the way, I don't even think that he knows today is Tuesday. And that's a problem for this country. And I don't say that flippantly. He has not had, if you observe like we do, what I would call a clean event in months, meaning that he's not mumbling, bumbling, stumbling, not knowing whether to exit stage left or stage right. You've got teams of people, letting him go up the baby stairs of Air Force One because he's not strong enough physically to get up the big boy stairs. We've got a real problem. China's watching, Russia's watching, Iran is watching, North Korea's watching. This world is a dangerous place, and I think things will get really out of control if we don't change course in November.
Sean, last thing, ahead of the midterms, we looked at polls and we thought this is going to be potentially a blowout for Republicans as you looked at the issue of immigration, as you looked at crime, as you looked at the economy. But then the Democrats went with a threat to democracy and obviously played on the issue of abortion very heavily in races across the country. I talked to Brit Hume earlier. He said he can't remember polls that were this upside down on a lot of issues for the current president. But should we have that caveat? Because clearly they're going with threat to democracy and going with abortion heavily as we look at these polls today, and then you fast forward to the general election.
Yeah, both of you asking great questions tonight. I got to give you credit. I will say this. We already know what the Democratic playbook is going to be. It's going to be democracy, and it's kind of ironic. The people that are doing that are the very people that would unilaterally allow one politician to take a candidate off the ballot for the reason of insurrection, something Donald Trump has never been tried, even tried with, or even there's never been a case brought against him on it, never mind convicted of it. So you want to talk about a threat to democracy, I would argue that is a threat to democracy. But, to your broader point, Brett, I will tell you, they're going to run on democracy. They're going to run on January 6th. They're going to run on the issue of abortion. I would argue, and I think I'm right, that in 22, Republicans were not prepared for how the Democrats would demagogue the issue of abortion. And I understand people have very strong convictions. However, if you want to look at it strictly from a political point of view, and I believe in the sanctity of life, but I understand that the country is not where I am. Politically, the country is at probably where Dobbs was at 15 weeks. Republicans need to understand that. If they pick somebody like they did in 22, like Doug Mastriano, who made no exceptions for rape, incest, of the mother's life, I think that is a mistake. They've got to have an answer for the millions and millions of dollars that will be spent on ads about abortion. I was glad to see President Trump come out quickly on the issue of IVF and with a very strong statement supporting it. And the next thing is Republicans, then it's going to be the other playbook, which is Republicans are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water, transphobic, and they want to kill grandma and grandpa. So that will be their playbook. That's all they've got, because they can't run on one thing, Brett and Martha. They can't run on, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Well, Sean, as always, we appreciate it. Thanks for
great job
the coverage
tonight, guys.
this
Good to see
hour.
you, Sean. Thank you very much.
By the way, I got to say this about Hemmer. Is he not great at that big board?
That
used to be the Hannity big board.
Right now.
He is.
Thank you.
He's just waiting around. Let's make a couple calls first.
Exactly. So this is the latest call that we've got from our Fox News decision desk. Former President Trump will win the Colorado primary for the Republicans, and President Biden will win on the Democratic side in Colorado. Once again, no big surprises there, but sometimes what's in some of these numbers gets pretty interesting as we look around the country, and that is why we go to Mr. Bill Hemmer.
What's happening? Just hanging out over here.
Sean Hannity's your PR agent.
My name was invoked, yeah. I'm going to give you a quick spin here, and I'm going to just give you some perspective in the end on all this, okay? Let's start up in Vermont, because this race has not been called here. We talk about the 50% mark. Earlier, Nikki Haley had a slight lead. Donald Trump was pulled out at an advantage of about 800 raw votes, computes to about 2.5 percentage points. So he's doing better than the last time we checked in the state of Vermont. And that was seen by a lot of people as like the state that Nikki Haley could win tonight. Then we come out here to Colorado, because this was just called a moment ago with Donald Trump picking up a victory in Colorado. Let me go to Minnesota just to see what's happening right now. Too early to call, just 1% of the vote being reported. We'll see how this changes. Now I want to come down to Texas. I want to show you what Trump has done now in 8 years, okay? The state's been called in Texas. I want to show you where the party was 8 years ago. And as I go back in time here, everything you see that's blue is a county that Ted Cruz won. Granted, it was his home state, but nonetheless, very impressive 8 years ago for Ted Cruz, and frankly, kind of impressive for what Trump has done now eight years later. And Oklahoma, right, border state to the north, this is where it was 8 years ago. It was all blue. It was Ted Cruz, and now this is Donald Trump's party. It's his nomination. The question is, when does he get there? Let me try and just get you here to a delegate tracker here. Now, some of this is behind because it's based on the congressional district, and all the votes haven't been tabulated yet. But this is where we are, just shy of 300 delegates for Donald Trump. It needs to get to 1215. It won't happen tonight. It may happen a week from tonight. If not, it for sure rather should happen 2 weeks from tonight. So that's where we are, guys. Back over to you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. All right, a live look now at Trump campaign headquarters at Mar-a-Lago, where there is a big crowd. They are excited. Aisha Hasmi is there covering that for us. We do expect that we will hear from former President Donald Trump, who is a big winner tonight, coming up shortly. We'll take you there live.
This is a Fox News Alert Super Tuesday. You're looking live at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. We're expecting the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, to get out there and accept what are a number of victories. It may be all of them before the night is through. We're looking at a couple of these races to see if they tighten up. We look at Vermont. It's the tightest of the tight. But right now, 48% in. The former president leading 48.5 to 47% there. He has won a number of races already this evening.
He won Virginia, which was also another area where Nikki Haley felt that she had a chance. She won D.C. the other day, but that one has gone to former President Trump. So also, former President Trump scored a major legal victory in Colorado this week when the Supreme Court 9-0 unanimously rejected the effort to kick him off the state's ballot. Alicia Acuna reporting live from Denver tonight. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Martha. Hi, Brett. Yeah, you have to imagine that for former President Trump, tonight's victory in Colorado must be extra sweet when you consider that early yesterday morning there was still a question of whether or not votes for him would even be counted. Because of printing deadlines, the Colorado Secretary of State had to issue ballots that contained his name. However, they came with a warning saying that if the Supreme Court does not decide his way, that those votes would not be counted. Of course, the Colorado Secretary of State, a Democrat, Jenna Griswold, had expressed deep regret and disappointment at the decision, by the unanimous decision by the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court to allow former President Trump on the Colorado ballot. She did, however, have to add that all votes would be counted. And what's interesting is that we've also heard from supporters of Nikki Haley, supporters of President Biden, who also said that they also believe that former President Trump should be on the ballot. Did they support him? No. But did they support his right to be on the ballot? Yes. And one other note I will tell you, there was one voter, this one woman, who said that she believed that the Supreme Court was going to make the right decision. That wasn't her concern. But the fact that we had gotten to this point at this level, for her, it was simply sad. Back to you.
Alicia, thank you very much.
Shannon Bream is standing by with her legal panel in Washington, D.C. Shannon, you have a potpourri of legal issues to talk about if you'd like to choose a couple.
We do, and I think next up is going to be Georgia and Fani Willis. That's where we're going with Jonathan Turley and Andy McCarthy. Okay, so this is another place, Andy, that President Trump's legal team is feeling bullish. We're waiting to see whether the judge there, Scott McAfee, kicks her off, disqualifies her, or Nathan Wade from the case. What do you think as we wait?
I think there's a very good chance that not only will Fani Willis be kicked off the case, but that her office will be taken off the case. And to me, that's the interesting part of it, because if the whole case goes to a different prosecutor who's not as invested in this cockamamie RICO theory that she brought in the case, then it's a very different prosecution.
Yeah, and now, Jonathan, we have somebody else who's come forward. I mean, they had sort of the closing arguments last Friday, but this person is saying, if you would be willing to take more evidence in the case, I know more about what happened here.
No, it's like a series of jump scares in these proceedings. Every day, someone stands up and says, I also have testimony to give. And what's interesting about this one is it's another prosecutor who, first of all, says that I heard this witness say that the relationship began long before Nathan Wade was hired. Now, the judge could easily say, look, we have that in the bag. We already know that that Bradley's testimony contradicted what he told counsel. And it's pretty clear in his text that he didn't have any problem with his memory when he was talking to counsel.
And just to remind folks, when he was asked in the back and forth text, when do you know for sure that this started earlier? He said the word absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. But what I think is more troubling for the court is that there is a second recounting which says that this prosecutor had heard Willis say that you should not basically should not give information about our relationship. Now, if she actually heard Willis herself say that, either over a speakerphone or in person, that could be viewed as influencing a witness. Keep in mind that Wade and Willis are already accused of filing false statements with the court. They are prosecuting people in this case for that alleged crime. Now, if they're accused of influencing a witness, at least in Willis's case, that's also one of the counts in this case. So at some point, it becomes untenable that you're being accused of the same conduct you're prosecuting people for. So the question is even before you get to what the judge does, is what are they doing in this case? I mean, they are clearly putting their personal interest ahead of their case in their office.
Well, quickly, Andy, if they are booted from the case, do you think it gets tried before the election?
I don't think it gets tried before the election anyway, as it's conceived, because she doesn't have, the only thing these 19 people have ever done together is get indicted. She doesn't have a conspiracy, and she certainly doesn't have a RICO.
Well, we await that decision from the judge, and for now, I'll take it back to Brett and Martha.
Shannon, thank you.
The parry between the legal cases and the election that we talked so much about is now playing out in real time tonight on Super Tuesday. And we do have some more for you from our decision desk as we monitor the White House and Mar-a-Lago, where they are watching this very closely. We do expect that we'll hear from former President Trump at the podium you see on the right-hand side of your screen very shortly when Super Tuesday's special coverage continues next.
The Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Donald Trump will win Minnesota. That is President Biden, who also will win Minnesota. But the former president is going to win the state of Minnesota. And there you see it, 73-24, only 12% in. But based on the raw total and what we know from our surveys, we can make that call tonight in Minnesota. So you've got the delegates ticking up one by one as he wins these states.
Yeah, we'll get a breakdown of Minnesota for President Biden as well. That was one area where they were looking at the uncommitted vote as a potentially interesting story. So when we get some more numbers on that, we'll go back and tell you that story. But at Mar-a-Lago tonight, they are waiting for the President Donald Trump, the former president, to come out. He wants to be president again. He's got a good-sized crowd there. So let's bring in our panel, talk about what's going on tonight so far. We have Kayleigh McEnany with us, former press secretary at the White House. Mark Thiessen is here as well. Katie Pavlich, Juan Williams, and Ari Fleischer. Great to have.
Payne.
And Charles Payne.
We have so many people on this panel tonight.
We ran out of room in the prompter.
This is a party now. Maybe we should have the open bar.
Exactly.
We should have the open bar.
I think we're going to crack that open in about 25
that, we should start with
minutes.
Charles.
Exactly. So over to you, Mr. Payne. Your thoughts on tonight so far?
I think tonight has gone, more or less as planned, right? And, of course, watching from an economic angle, it really is interesting. There are three things that I think former President Trump has gone for him, and two wild cards that are creeping into play. Goldman Sachs put together an amazing report of all the recent elections, and they say number one indicator of who will win is consumer spending in the few weeks and months before the election. And right now, where Biden is, all the presidents before him, except for Obama, all lost. Job growth, where Biden is, he's right at the line where all the ones who had greater growth won, all that had the similar growth lost. Same thing with inflation, which is not coming down fast enough. The pace of inflation is not slow fast enough. Two other wild cards, gasoline prices are starting to turn up. They really are starting to turn up and build some momentum. And then there's the Federal Reserve. Interesting, the Federal Reserve, 4 out of 5 times that they cut rates in an election year, a Democrat won. 5 out of 5 times they hiked rates in an election year, a Republican won. Now, Wall Street thinks there are going to be 3 rate cuts this year, and they can't come soon enough for Joe Biden. Those are the things I'm watching.
Ari, you've been through Super Tuesdays when John McCain was running and having to bring a party together at the end of everything, which is not an easy thing to do, especially as emotions are flaring and people are upset. What about this job for the former president tonight as we look live at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, there's no question the 2000 primary was acrimonious, and it took years for that to heal. It did not heal as soon as George W. Bush was declared or won the Republican primary states. John McCain remained angry at George W. Bush. George Bush made peace with John McCain, but it was a very unsteady peace. And could you argue that hurt George Bush and how close the election was in the fall of 2000? I don't know, but in a race that close, everything matters. Going forward, you know, the way you heal a party is by speaking in healing language and healing tone. Do you want to crush your opponents, or do you want to beat them and welcome them back in? Because you'd rather have them with you than with Joe Biden. And that'll be where President Trump's remarks are going to be important tonight. The Republican Party is a changing party, and Donald Trump has accelerated those changes. It's becoming much more a blue-collar party, a working-class party, a less educated party, and a lower-income party. But these changes, Brett, started under Ronald Reagan. Reagan in '88 won 62% of the college vote. George H.W. Bush, when he ran and won, he got 51% of the college vote. Donald Trump got 43% of the college-educated vote. Suburbs. Reagan won 20 percentage points in the suburbs. George W. Bush, when he won the suburbs by 5. Donald Trump lost them by 2. These have been long-standing trends that Trump has accelerated, and we're on the tipping point now.
So, Kayleigh, you look at that group of Republicans, conservatives in the suburbs, in those places, the highly educated voter that Nikki Haley has done well with over the course of these primaries so far. Can the Trump coalition win the presidential election without those people?
I don't think it's a bet you want to make. Because, look, if I'm President Trump, I'm thrilled that I'm leading with Hispanic voters in New York Times, Siena. I'm thrilled 10% of 2020 Biden voters want to come to me. I'm thrilled that I'm rising among the black community. But I don't want to take any bets. I want registered Republicans, tried and true voters, election after election, to come home to me. And I think tonight, one thing he could say is, look, I think you can gently prod Nikki Haley tonight because she's kind of backpedaled on her endorsement language. If he exceeds the 1,000 delegate mark, he can say, Nikki Haley achieved something great. She is the first Republican woman to ever win a primary. She's arguably the most successful woman in Republican politics. Look, she won D.C. He can even be tongue-in-cheek. I'll give her D.C. However, Nikki Haley has a choice. She said herself today, general elections are choices. I am, for all intents and purposes, the Republican nominee. You have a choice where your daughter can go running in this country and not fall victim to an illegal immigrant. You have a choice in this country where you can afford a home. And I encourage Nikki Haley and her voters to make that choice. One point I would make quickly, because I don't think all the problems with enthusiasm are just on the Trump side. If you flip over and look right now at North Carolina, 72% reporting, there are 60,000 no preference voters against Joe Biden. That is no small number. There's more than 10,000 already in Massachusetts with less than 10% reporting. That could be a mutiny on the Democratic side. I would take great issue with that if I were President Joe Biden.
Okay, Juan, what are you looking at tonight? And as we get ready to see President Biden in the spotlight on Thursday for the State of the Union.
Well, that's exactly what I'm looking at. I think this is the kickoff. I mean, I'm just looking at these numbers. Everybody can see the clear direction. It's Biden versus Trump. And you see that at the moment, I think we are still in the grips of the Trump show. I think everything is about Donald Trump. And everybody's arguing about Donald Trump. And everybody has an attitude about Donald Trump. And how is Donald Trump going to handle Nikki Haley? And how is Donald Trump going to handle these legal issues? And I mean, he's a fascinating character. I think he defines this era of American politics. But if you look at it in this moment, I think that leads to distortion because you're not looking at November. And you're not looking at all the money, and believe me, the Biden team has a tremendous money advantage right now. So you're not looking at all the changes that are going to take place by November. One of the things we've been discussing tonight, and I heard a lot of this in the decision room, is people coming home. Republicans will come home, but Democrats also will come home. And why do I say that? You look at the polls, And what the polls say is, oh, we're so concerned about Biden's age. And you dig in, you say, well, Republicans are going to say that. They're natural critics of the Democrat. But you find there are lots of Democrats who are saying, well, maybe we'd like somebody else. We're worried about his age. You know, the cliche is the bedwetters. Well, guess what? The bedwetters come home, too.
All right, but let me, to Kayleigh's point, and I love the bedwetter analogy, but we just have a call now. In American Samoa, President Biden will lose to Jason Palmer, a self-described entrepreneur and investor. He is going to win the American Samoa Democratic Caucus. This marks President Biden's first loss in the 2024 primaries. Palmer takes 4 delegates. President Biden takes 2. We saw uncommitted with more than 100,000 votes in Michigan. I don't even know who Jason Palmer is. But he is now the winner.
That President Biden has spent an enormous amount of time in American Samoa working on this election.
And is about to soar in American Samoa.
Let me just ask about the unity question. There's a lot of focus on unity on the Republican side. But when you talk about the Israel-Hamas, the Gaza issue, when you talk about immigration, when you talk about crime in big cities, there is a unity issue on the Democratic side, Juan.
Without a doubt. Just look at the numbers. Look at the polls. But again, when you start diving into it, let's take the Arab community in Michigan. You say, okay, so fast forward to November. Where are you going? Either you're voting for Biden or you're staying home. And the big risk for Biden is that you stay home. But it's not the case that you say, we're going to go for Trump, the guy who had the Muslim ban, the guy who moved the capital to Jerusalem, and, you know, lots of people in the Arab community would see that as having ignited a lot of the discontent.
Although he also did the Abraham Accords, which brought Saudi Arabia and others together.
You go talk to people in the Arab community, that's not what they're talking about. They had a lot of discontent, and I think that you'll see that, and that's why it's a matter of stay at home or vote for Biden. That's the choice. But I think your point is a very important one. Lots of dissent among Democrats, and I think we see this in the minority numbers, the black vote, the Hispanic vote. But again, you come back to the big ticket items as we head to November. You come back to abortion. You come back to an improving economy. And you come back to the idea that people are saying, gosh, chaos. I remember why we didn't vote for Trump in 2020.
Well, no doubt that's going to be hammered home by the Biden team. And we've known for a long time that there are a lot of people who don't want the matchup to be what it clearly is, but that both of these individuals, who essentially is a quasi-incumbent and an incumbent, so not a big surprise that they're winning their party's nomination. But what comes after that when it starts to play out? We'll continue this conversation. We'll get to Mark and Katie as soon as we get back. And we are awaiting the comments, I should say, from former President Trump, who's having a huge night and a big celebration about to be had in Mar-a-Lago. We'll take you there live next. It is 9:50 on the East Coast, a live look at Mar-a-Lago, where former President Trump is going to deliver his Super Tuesday victory speech at around 10:15. We are being told this evening, so obviously we'll keep a close eye on that. We'll take you there as soon as that gets underway.
Get there earlier. I'm not sure.
Champing at the bit, ready to come out. In the meantime, let's bring in former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, Speaker, good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Your thoughts on tonight? What do you think about this and where the party is heading, more importantly? A lot of talk about unifying the party.
Well, I think it's pretty clear what most people have thought throughout this campaign. This race is going to be with President Biden versus President Trump. What's interesting about this is a lot of personalities there, but it's really going to be about issues. The top 3 issues: the border, the economy, and foreign policy. What's unique here is both men have different positions. There's contrast. So the voters, when they vote, are going to make a real difference. What I would look at is, in the last election, in 2020, President Trump came 42,918 votes away from winning. But what were the poll numbers then? President Trump has the exact same poll numbers. But this is the interesting part. President Biden was a +10 favorability. He's now a -21. So what that means is he's in a very bad place, and re-elections, when you're the incumbent, is a report card on you. What President Trump needs to do is, it's about addition, not subtraction. Not only just unite the party, but bring Democrats and independents in if you can. This needs to be about rebuilding, restoring, and renewing America, not revenge. And I've watched President Trump bring people back who have said some of the meanest things about him and welcome him into the fold. He's done it many times before, and I think in that case, he could have a very big night in November and win the Senate and expand in the House.
Mr. Speaker, this Thursday is the State of the Union. It's the first in a few years that you won't be sitting behind the President of the United States trying to hold your facial expressions one way or another. If you were still Speaker today, would you have brought forward that immigration bill that came over from the Senate? Because, you know, Thursday we're going to hear from President Biden a lot about the fact that Republicans did not take up what he'll call a bipartisan piece of legislation that should have gone through.
Well, if I was still Speaker, I would not have let the Senate negotiate it. I would have gone and negotiated directly with the President, because in that bill, it gives a lot of preference to the President to make a decision whether he can change law, which you would never have. If you were the Speaker of the House, you don't give your power away. When we negotiated the debt ceiling, we got welfare reform, we got NEPA reform, we cut $20 billion from the IRS. The other leaders, Schumer and Hakeem, would never provide that to you. But you have greater strength negotiating directly with the President. If you were Speaker, don't give your power to the Senate. Use that majority for a greater strength. So you could actually do something much different. So the question wouldn't be, would I allow the Senate to bring something? The question would have been, we would have brought H.R. 2, what we have actually passed the House when I was Speaker, and put that on to the Senate and the President and make him question whether he was going to sign it.
Talk to me a little bit about Nikki Haley. I'm just looking at some of these numbers that are going by as we're listening to you speak. Vermont is tight. That's not a huge surprise. She campaigned there a lot. But in most of these states, 17, 20, 25%, 30% in some of these places. What do you think happens next with her? She has said she will not come out and make a speech tonight. First time in this primary process that that's happened. What did it tell you?
Well, what it probably tells me is probably her campaign is going to come to a close, but it's not the close for Nikki Haley. She did a tremendous campaign. She is still standing. She is beginning 30% most places. So that means she has a big voice in this party. And if this party, the Republican Party, wants to be the big tent, the party I know it to be, and you want to expand, Nikki Haley has a bright future, because either one of the two men who are up for the nomination this time to win can only serve one term. So I think she has a very bright future, and I would hope she'd be part of the future administration. She did a tremendous job at the UN. She's very capable of her job as governor. She has the great force across this nation, and she can help unite this party. And I think it would be upon her to find the way where you can find common ground. Look, I watched Bernie Sanders sit down with Biden. I watched Kamala Harris, who said some of the meanest things about Joe Biden in the future, and sit down with him as well. So this is an opportunity to put the country before yourself. And also, when I look at President Trump, open this up even further, this party. And I watched when he picked Mike Pence to be his VP nominee. Mike Pence had endorsed against him just 2 months prior. So President Trump has proven again that he can open the party up one more time.
Former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, thank you very much for being with us. Meantime, former President Trump about to address supporters at Mar-a-Lago. We will bring you there live as our Super Tuesday coverage continues after this.